Hey guys, tonight we slip under the heavy velvet curtain of time and crawl into a bedroom thick with coal smoke, candlelight, and secrets. You're in Victorian England, now foggy, buttoned up, and slightly creaky. The streets outside are horse-worn and wet. The wallpaper smells faintly of varnish and ash, and your pillow, stitched with lavender, stuffed with goose down, and rumor has it possibly full of contraband. This is a world where the bed is not just for sleep, it's a symbol, a fortress, a container, and sometimes a hiding place. You'll notice right away nothing in this era is simple. Everything has layers. Corsets, etiquette, curtains, and yes, furniture, especially the kind of furniture designed for rest, for privacy, for escape. Beds here are massive, elaborately carved and built like something between a throne and a confession booth. But not all of them are what they seem. Some of these beds contain hidden drawers, compartments, even false panels. For jewelry, maybe. For scandalous love letters, probably. For a small revolver wrapped in silk. You probably won't survive this time period long enough to find out, especially if you keep poking around like that. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is where you are. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You begin in the soot-choked heart of London. The year is 1857, and the smell of roasted chestnuts mixes oddly with sewage and chimney smoke. Everything is covered in a light film of coal dust, your coat, your eyelashes, your lungs. You trudge through the narrow gas-lit streets toward a townhouse glowing faintly behind thick drapes. Inside, everything is warmer, denser. The air smells like beeswax and something sugary, maybe custard, maybe decay. You're here to stay with a cousin you've never met, a distant branch of the family tree that got rich off shipping tea and possibly pirating it first. They greet you at the door with a dry nod, barely registering your existence, and hand you off to the maid like a sack of potatoes wearing a travel coat. She leads you up a staircase that squeaks like it's trying to confess something. Your bedroom is at the top floor, tucked under the sloping roof. The bed dominates the space like a polite monster. It's four-posted, swaddled in drapes, the color of dried blood, and so high off the ground you could store a family of raccoons under it. Possibly a common practice, honestly. You clamber up with the help of a footstool and sink into something that's less mattress and more marsh. As you lie there staring at the flickering ceiling, you notice the furniture around you. The wardrobe like a coffin on legs, the wash basin made of enamel and hope, and the chair that's clearly never meant to be sat in. And the bed, this hulking, ornate thing with carved lion's paws and oddly lumpy corners, makes you curious. Why is the headboard so thick? Why does the footboard creak when you press on the flower carving? And what's that odd notch underneath the side rail? You make a mental note to investigate in the morning. Or never, because you've also just learned about something called bed bugs, and your imagination is sprinting laps around the room. Victorians were obsessed with beds. More than a place to sleep, your bed said things about you. If it was plain and pine, you were poor or pious or both. If it had rosewood inlays and silk canopies, you were probably rich and probably about to suffocate from all the curtains. They believed sleep was a moral act. You had to do it correctly in the correct bed, wearing the correct nightcap with the correct posture, or risk weakening your constitution. Beds came with rules. Pillows weren't stacked, they were selected. Sheets were crisp, blankets were heavy, and tucking was practically an Olympic event. They also believed your environment affected your dreams. Too much red and you dream of violence. Too much clutter and your soul might get tangled on its way out during sleep. That's right, many Victorians believed the soul left the body at night and wandered, which is exactly why you never ever locked a sleeping person in a room. If their soul couldn't get back in, well, now you've got a ghost on your hands. And so your first night in a Victorian bed feels oddly crowded. The mattress groans like it remembers every previous sleeper. The curtains shift with drafts that may or may not be supernatural. And somewhere beneath you, just maybe there's a drawer filled with secrets no one's checked in decades. Historians still argue whether these secret compartments were widespread innovations or mostly confined to the homes of the eccentric wealthy. What we know is they existed. And tomorrow, once the fog burns off, you might just go looking for one yourself. But for now, you pull the quilt up to your chin, close your eyes, and try not to think about the phrase corpse drawer, which you definitely just invented, but now can't unthink. Morning arrives with a kind of gray apology. The sun doesn't so much rise as cautiously seep through the smudged glass like a guest unsure it was invited. You lie still for a moment, buried in the bed's immense folds of linen and wool, listening to the unfamiliar creaks and low voices beyond your door. Somewhere downstairs, someone is boiling water, possibly for tea, possibly to murder you slowly with steam. The bed has shifted overnight. Not physically, you're fairly certain you're still lying where you fell asleep, but perceptually. Last night it felt protective, cocoon-like, the way a heavy blanket makes you feel anchored. This morning it feels like a vault, a stage, maybe even a trap. You sit up slowly. The headboard looms behind you, thick and carved with a swirling rose motif that seems to squint in the daylight. The footboard is equally hefty, with turned posts like miniature lighthouses. A closer inspection reveals something peculiar. There's a very fine seam running horizontally along the base of the headboard, so subtle it might be decorative or functional. You lean and brush your fingers across it, and it yields the faintest give. Of course you don't open it. Not yet, because you're British now. Well, Victorian anyway, and that means first decorum. You must freshen up at the washstand with the icy water from last night's pitcher, dab your face dry with a towel, made from what feels like starched doilies, and greet the house's human occupants before you go rifling through its wooden ones. Downstairs, breakfast is served in silence, broken only by the distant toll of a clock that sounds like it's given up on optimism. Your cousin barely acknowledges your presence in the conversation. What little there is concerns the weather. Miserable, the neighbor's dog insolent, and the maid's recent engagement inappropriate. It's not until you're back in your room coat off, curtain drawn against the drizzle, that you finally kneel beside the headboard and tug at the seam. It clicks, not loudly but distinctly. A small portion of the panel swings outward, revealing a shallow recess lined with velvet, now faded to the color of dried sage. Inside, nothing but dust and a single brass button. You blink. Not gold, not jeweled, just a button. Polished to a dull sheen, clearly old with a fleur-de-lis design so delicate you almost miss it. You pluck it up, turning it between your fingers. Was it a keepsake, a uniform relic, a placeholder for something once hidden beside it? Victorians, it turns out, love building mystery into the mundane. Your bed is not a standalone oddity. It's part of a broader trend that transformed furniture into multifunctional masterpieces. Beds weren't just for sleeping. They were political statements, medical devices, security systems. The era's obsession with compartmentalization, literal and metaphorical, reflected the period's values: privacy, propriety, and the polished facade. A well-to-do Victorian would rather burn a love letter than let it be found lying about, hence the need for hiding places. And what better place to hide something than in the most personal, most protected piece of furniture in the house? Bed makers responded to the demand. Some began crafting elaborate frames with secret drawers under the mattress. Others built false panels into headboards and footboards. A few even embedded combination locks, yes, really into nightstands or side rails. It was furniture for the morally anxious. One famous example, the Kensington Sleeper, a four-poster bed popular in the 1870s among London's upper middle class. Ostensibly a symbol of domestic order, it often came with hidden compartments disguised as structural supports. The manufacturer never advertised them. You only knew if you knew, which of course made them irresistible. Historians still argue whether these beds were primarily used for safety or scandal. Some say they were practical people hiding valuables from burglars or important papers from nosy relatives. Others argue that secret compartments were often used for more colorful purposes: smuggled tobacco, private diaries, illicit correspondence, possibly even absinthe. Victorian rebellion smelled like fennel and poor decisions. And then there's the theory that some compartments weren't used during the owner's life at all, but after. Death in the Victorian home was rarely outsourced. Bodies were laid out in bedrooms, mourned under their own canopy. Letters to loved ones, final confessions, wishes, secrets might be tucked inside headboard drawers, meant to be discovered days or even decades later. You look back down at the brass buttons still resting in your palm. It could have belonged to a military coat, a decorative cushion, or a secret society uniform for all you know. Its story, if it ever had one, is buried in time and velvet. Suddenly you understand something: this bed isn't just furniture, it's a time capsule. And the Victorians knew that. They built their lives with one eye on the future, on the idea that someone, maybe you, might be curious enough to pry open a hidden drawer and wonder who they were. You tuck the button back inside gently, close the panel, and for a moment you feel like a ghost of the future haunting the past. Outside, the rain picks up. Inside, the bed creaks faintly, as if shifting in its sleep. The rain lingers all day, making the house feel even heavier than usual, like it's swaddled in wet wool. You spend most of it wandering the rooms, each one its own little shrine to overstuffed decoration. Doilies balanced precariously on armrests, portraits of long-dead relatives glare down from gloomy walls, and at least one umbrella stand appears to be made from a genuine elephant's foot. Taste clearly was optional. When you return to your bedroom, the fire is already lit. The maid, silent as ever, has fluffed the pillows and turned down the bed. The smell of coal and lavender fills the air, an oddly soothing combination if you don't think too hard about what either scent implies. You sit at the edge of the mattress, shoes off, staring at the place where you found the secret compartment. The little brass button haunts your thoughts. It wasn't worth anything, not really. But the fact that it had been hidden, that someone had tucked it away deliberately, gives it weight. Intent changes everything. And that's when you realize that Victorians weren't just obsessed with beds. They were obsessed with what beds meant. In Victorian England, your bed was a mirror of your morality, your wealth, your health, even your politics. A well-appointed bed was a symbol of middle-class respectability. Visitors were often given tours of bedrooms, not to admire the art, but to inspect the bed, the drapery, the linens, the level of dust on the canopy poles. It wasn't nosiness, it was a kind of social x-ray. A good bed was high with a thick mattress, multiple bolsters, and at least one tassel that served no function but screamed affluence. A bad bed was low, flat, and clean, only in the sense that it was routinely avoided by rodents. This preoccupation created what we now refer to as the Great Bed Obsession. Furniture makers, mattress manufacturers, and linen companies flourished. Catalogs featured entire pages of bed ensembles, essentially starter kits for moral superiority. Even Charles Dickens, who wasn't exactly known for his interior decorating, commented on the absurdity. In household words, he once described a bed that was so heavy with curtains and trim that it resembled a silken coffin designed to bury the living. Cheerful man, but perhaps the oddest aspect of this bed obsession was how it began to intersect with secrecy. Because if your bed was a symbol of who you were publicly, it also had to protect who you were privately. Enter the hidden compartments. Now, not every Victorian bed had them, of course, but they became more common among the wealthy and quietly paranoid. Some were built custom, commissioned by people who had something to hide or simply liked the thrill of being the only one who knew. Others were more commercially available, with drawers concealed in the bed rails or behind the decorative appliques on footboards. And while some compartments were used for purely practical reasons, storing letters, coins, or the occasional snack, no judgment, others had more intriguing purposes. One particularly famous example, the so-called Bath secret bed, commissioned by a widow in 1868, who believed her late husband's relatives were trying to steal her inheritance. She hired a furniture maker to build a bed with a compartment large enough to store legal documents and small valuables. When she died unexpectedly a few years later, her nephew discovered the hidden space filled with promissory notes, unsent letters, and a tin of very stale lemon drops, which honestly just feels poetic. Historians still argue whether the trend was primarily domestic or if it had links to the larger cultural paranoia of the time. This was, after all, the era of secret societies, coded correspondences, and political unrest. If you were inclined to secrecy, your bed was an ideal accomplice, always close, rarely questioned, and large enough to hide more than just secrets. Of course, not all compartments were built into the frame. Some Victorians used the mattress itself. Yes, really. Old feather mattresses often had seams or patches that could be discreetly opened, creating a soft hiding place for papers or small items. Just imagine lying there night after night with your will or a bundle of forged train tickets tucked inches from your spine. Sweet dreams indeed. You look down at your own mattress, now suddenly suspicious. Could there be something inside it? You lean forward, press your palms into the fabric, and feel nothing unusual. But then again, would you know if there was something? You pull back the coverlet, then the sheet, then the thin linen protector. The mattress beneath is hand-stitched and slightly lumpy, like a topographical map of someone's regrets. You run your fingers along the seams. Nothing opens. No creaks, no soft give. But still you wonder, because Victorians weren't just clever, they were layered, and they often believed that the best way to hide something was to embed it in the ordinary. After all, no one ever suspects the bed. You lie back again, eyes tracing the carved swirls in the canopy above. A lion, a rose, a snarling cherub. All symbolic probably, or maybe just decorative. With the Victorians, it's hard to tell where symbolism ends and clutter begins. The fire crackles softly, and your eyelids grow heavy. Somewhere deep in the wood, the bed lets out a tiny sigh like it's settling or maybe remembering. Tomorrow you might poke at the footboard or beneath the slats, but tonight you let the bed have its secrets, for now. You wake to the sharp tang of coal smoke and the faint sound of hooves clopping somewhere far below your window. Morning in the city is less a gentle welcome and more a blunt return. Still, your eyes go straight to the bed frame as if you expect it to have rearranged itself overnight. It hasn't. But that doesn't stop the feeling that this piece of furniture is more alive than you're comfortable admitting. You slide out from beneath the covers, feet finding the cold floorboards like they've done it 100 times before, and kneel at the footboard. It's carved elaborate scrollwork twisting into what might be flowers, or might be dragons, depending on your caffeine intake. You press experimentally. Nothing happens. You knock tap and run your knuckles along the lower panel until there. A soft click, not the theatrical sort, just a whisper of movement. A tiny drawer no wider than your palm glides forward about an inch. Inside, nothing. Absolutely nothing. And yet you grin. Because the drawer isn't the point. The drawer is the promise. You sit back on your heels, staring at this strange bed that seems determined to keep revealing itself 1 inch at a time. It's becoming clear that these compartments weren't always practical. Sometimes they were symbolic. In Victorian England, everything meant something. That's not an exaggeration, it's a worldview. A rose wasn't just a rose, it was purity or secrecy or eternal grief, depending on how many petals it had and what shade of wilting it currently exhibited. A bed wasn't just a place to collapse, it was a stage where your values were performed nightly. Upper-class Victorians especially delighted in using household items as markers of refinement. It wasn't enough to have a canopy bed. You had to have the right kind of canopy. Brocade acceptable, damask with hand-knotted fringe. Now that showed breeding. The more intricate, the better. The more uncomfortable, the more morally sound. Because comfort, you see, was suspect. It encouraged laziness, possibly sin. That's why you weren't allowed to lounge in bed. Sitting upright was encouraged. Bolsters were added not for softness, but posture. Many women even learned to embroider in bed, not for fun, but to ward off idleness, which was apparently a slippery slope to scandal. Victorians considered the bedroom a deeply moral space. It wasn't just private, it was sacred, which meant it had to be orderly. And that order often took the form of elaborate bed construction, complete with clever joinery, sliding panels, and even lockable drawers. Not for fun, for discipline. And yet, for all that discipline, people still had secrets. Take, for example, the curious case of the Redwick mahogany vault, a bed discovered in 1892 during the renovation of an old townhouse in Manchester. What appeared to be a typical four-poster turned out to contain a network of hidden compartments, 7 in total. 1 behind the headboard, 2 in the footboard, and 4 beneath the mattress slats. Inside, bundles of letters, dried flowers, a miniature portrait of an unknown woman, in a single theater program from Paris dated 1863. The owner of the house at the time, a retired judge known publicly for his strict moral code. Historians still argue whether he was hiding tokens of a secret lover evidence from an old case or simply collecting memories in a way he couldn't justify aloud. You stand up now, brushing off your knees. The drawer you discovered closes with a soft snick so well made that the seam vanishes again. It feels like the bed has accepted your curiosity, welcomed it even. You glance around the room. There's a chair, a small desk, a faded rug, but none of it holds your attention the way this bed does. Because this bed isn't just furniture, it's theater. And what's more theatrical than a piece of furniture designed not only to impress your guests, but to suggest you're the sort of person who might have secrets. The idea that a Victorian bed was a declaration, not just a thing you slept on, explains a lot about its size, its ornamentation, and yes, its secret compartments. Because having a drawer in your bed wasn't just practical, it was social code. It said, I am prepared, I am trustworthy. I can store the family's emergency cash or a pistol or grandmother's last letter. I am not frivolous, I am vigilant. Or maybe it said something else entirely. I like knowing there's a secret no one else does, which in this society of watchers and whisperers may have been the greatest luxury of all. You lie back down, arms folded beneath your head, and stare up at the canopy once more. One tassel sways faintly caught in a draft, or a breath, or something even older. Tonight you'll sleep knowing your bed has revealed a little of itself. Just enough to suggest it's not finished talking. And neither are you. Rain again, of course it is. The ceiling above you ticks with it tiny percussions from a sky that seems forever damp and disapproving. You roll over in bed, blanket bunched around your hips, and stare at the ornate headboard as if it might blink. Because the bed's secrets still itch at you. You found 2 compartments so far, but you can't shake the feeling there's more. Not just in this bed, but in all beds from this era. The Victorians, after all, were a peculiar breed, simultaneously obsessed with decorum and absolutely brimming with hidden chaos. You decide to go for a walk before the furniture starts talking back. As you wander through the corridor of the old townhouse, slippers muffled on the faded runner, you start to notice something peculiar. Almost every door has a lock from the inside, and not just a bolt. Some are intricate with rotating discs and double keys. It's the first time you realize just how obsessed this period was with privacy, or perhaps more accurately, the illusion of it. Because in Victorian society, you were never truly alone. Servants could enter at any time. Family members might listen through thin walls. And propriety dictated that most of your day was spent being seen. So the bedroom, particularly the bed, became a paradox. It was the most personal space in a house where nothing was truly private. That tension had consequences. For instance, it shaped how Victorians treated one another in intimate settings. It was common for married couples to sleep in separate beds. Not necessarily because they disliked one another, but because it was seen as proper, especially in upper-class homes. Bedrooms were about rest and ritual, not romance, which you might note is an excellent way to create a population of insomniacs and amateur compartment builders. This same moral compass influenced how one interacted with the idea of the bed. It wasn't polite to discuss it in mixed company. Advertisements for beds and mattresses were careful to avoid words like soft or indulgent. Instead, they used phrases like sound structure or excellent spine support, which makes it sound like you're buying a bed from a military surplus catalog. Even within the home, modesty ruled. It was considered rude to leave your bed unmade or your linens showing. Anything that hinted at bodily functions or physical comfort was suspect. A tidy bed was a tidy soul. Yet this obsession with appearances only made the hidden compartments more necessary. If you couldn't appear to have secrets, you needed to hide them well. That's where the artistry came in. Victorian cabinet makers weren't just artisans. They were engineers of etiquette. Many developed reputations for building beds with concealed drawers, disguised hinges, and even lockable panels embedded seamlessly within carvings. They became masters of hidden craftsmanship. The more invisible the mechanism, the more prestigious the piece. One celebrated figure was a man named Elias Thornbury, a London-based carpenter known for his silent drawers, bed compartments, so smooth and quiet they could be opened while someone was sleeping on top without waking them. He supposedly designed a bed with no visible drawers at all. The entire footboard slid apart if you pressed 2 rose carvings simultaneously. No schematics of this bed survive, but stories of it appear in a number of personal letters from the 1880s. Historians still argue whether Thornbury's beds were used by the aristocracy or London's more shadowy clients, detective smugglers, or worse, poets. Back in your room, you begin to look at your own bed with new eyes. You trace your fingers along the carved rows at the center of the footboard. It doesn't move, but you notice something strange, a faint discoloration around one of the petals, as though the varnish had been worn away more quickly than elsewhere. You press it gently. A click. You freeze. Nothing opens this time, but you now know something is there. The bed isn't done yet. There are still stories tucked into its frame. And as you lie back down that night, the concept of politeness as performance buzzes in your mind. Victorians, in their quiet way, used their homes to say what they could never say aloud. Their houses wore corsets too. Everything was controlled, contained, hidden, which makes the existence of secret bed compartments not just quirky, but deeply revealing. Because they prove what everyone suspected, but no one would dare admit that beneath all the ruffles and rules, people were still human, curious, cunning, occasionally chaotic. You close your eyes, the sound of rain now rhythmic, steady, and somewhere in the dark your bed shifts again. Not in body, in meaning. It's no longer just a place to sleep. It's an accomplice. You dream of hinges, not doors, not gates, just hinges. Smooth brass ones, tiny enough to fit in your palm. They open, they close, over and over. In the background, a faint scraping sound like someone sliding a drawer open slowly. And then a whisper, it's just under the rose. You wake with the certainty that your bed is watching you. Not in a sinister way, really. More like a well-meaning librarian who's decided you're finally ready to access the restricted section. The kind of gaze that says, you've been patient. Let's get weird. So you stretch, creak, and rise. The morning is strangely silent. No horses in the street, no clatter from the kitchen. Just the occasional puff of wind rattling the window pane. The whole house feels like it's holding its breath. You kneel once more at the footboard, press the discolored pedal you found yesterday, and this time you hold it. A panel pops free with a soft sigh. It slides open to reveal a small velvet-lined compartment, rectangular and surprisingly deep. Inside is a stack of folded parchment, yellowed at the edges, but still intact. Someone took care to store this. You hesitate. Then you lift the top sheet. It's not a letter, not a deed, not a will. It's a diagram, a bed sketched in meticulous detail. Every post, every joint, every drawer marked in spidery script. There are arrows pointing to parts of the frame, little notations written in an old-fashioned hand. One corner is labeled secondary drawer locked. Another reads button release, top right scroll. This is a map of the bed. You sit back, paper trembling slightly in your hands. Somewhere in the Victorian era, someone thought their bed was complex enough to require a legend. You laugh, because of course they did. Victorians had an astonishing ability to overcomplicate the ordinary. They invented contraptions to butter toast, to lace corsets, to extinguish candles with pulley systems. And so the idea of a bed being a miniature fortress of drawers, compartments, and secret levers, entirely in character. One particularly ridiculous example, the Lady Hamilton's Retreat, a custom-built bed from 1875 that featured not one, not two, but 11 hidden compartments. It had a drawer for letters, a tilt-away jewelry box in the headboard, a flip-out vanity mirror concealed in the canopy, a trapdoor beneath the mattress? Yes, really. A lockable drawer with a false bottom, a small whistle embedded in a post to summon the maid, and a concealed inkwell for midnight correspondence. Historians still argue whether Lady Hamilton was incredibly paranoid, incredibly busy, or just had an overwhelming hatred of standing up. But this wasn't uncommon. Beds in this period, especially for the wealthy or eccentric, became marvels of engineering. They were personalized. Secret compartments weren't always about danger or theft. Sometimes they were just about convenience in a world where modesty restricted movement. Women weren't supposed to wander the house in their nightclothes. Men might not want to store valuables in a visible bureau. And everyone had things they didn't want servants or spouses stumbling upon. And so beds evolved. They grew thicker, heavier, more ornate, and often more hollow. You peer into the compartment again. There are more pages beneath the map. Scribbled notes, sketches. One appears to be a list of objects with check marks: pocket watch, letter from E, tonic opium, lock of hair, second will burn original. You sit very still, because this is no longer curiosity. You've slipped into someone's past life, their schemes, their relationships, their small rebellions, and they hid it in the one place no one ever dared to look too closely: the bed. It makes sense in a darkly clever way. Victorian society made a public spectacle of virtue. Everything was wrapped in lace and etiquette, but inside people still long grieved, lie dreamed, and bed's silent patient became the keepers of those truths. The most intimate furniture in the most private space was also the most likely to hold confessions, which is probably why in so many of the mystery novels of the late Victorian period, the bed is often the place where the secret is finally uncovered. A false panel beneath a pillow, a coded letter sewn into a canopy fringe, a poison vial hidden behind the headboard. Fiction, yes, but based on very real furniture. You tuck the pages carefully back into the drawer, close it, and press the pedal to reseal the panel. Your heart is still thumping, but not from fear, from awe. Because you're starting to understand something essential about this era. Secrecy wasn't a flaw, it was a feature. And the beds, they weren't hiding something in spite of society's rules. They were hiding things because of them. You lie back down, palms folded over your chest like a scholar trying to dream more evidence into being. The bed creaks softly as if pleased. It knows you're listening now. You're still thinking about the diagram hours later, long after breakfast has passed, long after the house returns to its usual murmur of muffled footsteps and shifting coal fires. The map of your bed is now tucked inside the secret drawer like a conspirator biding its time. And your thoughts, well, they won't sit still. They wander through the carved joints of the bed frame, down into shadowy compartments, and back out through Victorian drawing rooms heavy with polite silence and suppressed truths. It hits you finally, these hidden bed compartments weren't just for protection or practicality. They were extensions of character, physical embodiments of things people couldn't say aloud. The secrets didn't always need to be big. They just had to be theirs. And in the world of Victorian social etiquette, ownership of private thoughts was a radical act. You leave the bedroom for a while, mostly to clear your head, but also because the bed is starting to feel a little smug. The fog has lifted, giving you a chance to explore the rest of the townhouse. Drawing rooms with matching antimacassars, a parlor organ that hasn't been played in decades, a library full of well-behaved leather spines, and behind it all, always the subtle presence of the servant class, unseen but ever present like polite ghosts. You can't help but wonder what they knew. Because here's the thing, while Victorian upper and middle class folks were busy pretending their beds were nothing more than vessels for virtue, the people dusting them, making them, moving them, knew better. Housemaids in particular were often keenly aware of what was hidden in and around beds. They changed the linens, fluffed the pillows, reached under mattresses. Some even kept unofficial inventories, mental checklists of what was always there and what had suddenly gone missing. There are dozens of anecdotes from the period about maids discovering hidden letters, coin purses, illicit photos, even contraband sweets. Some returned the items quietly. Others made notes. And that brings you to a fascinating truth in Victorian homes: privacy was a myth. Bedrooms were rarely fully private spaces. People came and went, curtains rustled, doors didn't always latch. And yet everyone pretended the boundary held, which made the illusion of secrecy even more valuable, hence the compartments. Historians still argue whether the growing use of hidden spaces in furniture was driven more by class paranoia or architectural trends. Some believe it reflected a growing unease among the newly wealthy, those rising in society and unsure who they could trust. Others see it as part of a broader movement toward intimate space design, where homes began to evolve with smaller, more personalized corners, nooks, and tucked away places for private reflection or storage. Whatever the reason, furniture adapted. One London-based cabinet maker named Silas Norridge became infamous in the 1860s for creating servant-proof beds, complete with lockable drawers and secret sliding panels only the owners could access. He even patented a rotating pillow panel meant to store sensitive documents without altering the bed's appearance. You can't help but imagine how many dowries, deathbed letters, and late-night regrets were hidden in his craftsmanship. Back in your room, you sit quietly on the edge of the bed, running your fingers along the diagram's notes in your mind. Button, release, top right scroll. You reach toward the intricately carved canopy post nearest the headboard and look for the scroll design mentioned. There it is, one tiny twist of wood just slightly off-center. You press it, not expecting much, and yet a faint clunk. You scramble back around the frame and see a new gap. The side panel near your pillow has shifted, revealing a shallow, perfectly rectangular recess. Inside it, a velvet pouch. You hesitate only a second before opening it. Within, a locket. Simple. Gold. Worn. Inside it, a faded daguerreotype of a woman in profile, chin, lifted gaze somewhere above the lens. You can't tell if she's young or just composed, but someone loved her. Or lost her. You close the locket gently, the hinges sighing like lungs at rest. There's nothing else in the compartment. Just enough dust to suggest it's been untouched for decades. The bed is a little quieter now. Not smug, just settled, like it's passed you something it needed to give away. You slide the compartment closed again, noting how seamlessly it vanishes. How invisibly the bed resumes its posture of innocence. It's poetic, really, because Victorian beds weren't just containers of sleep. They were containers of story, of grief, of longing, of daily discipline and midnight rebellion. They held their owners in every sense of the word, and the secret compartments, they weren't always about danger. Sometimes they were just about holding on to memories, to people, to pieces of yourself you weren't ready to let anyone else see. As night begins to fall and the fire crackles once more to life, You lie back beneath the canopy and let your fingers rest against the carved scroll. The locket stays close, still warm from your hand, and the bed, ever patient, ever private, draws in the quiet. You wake before dawn, this time stirred by something quieter than a sound, a kind of hush that feels intentional, almost rehearsed. The house is still, but not idle. It's the kind of stillness that waits. You roll onto your side blanket, tangled at your waist, eyes open in the gloom. The locket lies on the nightstand, now its faded photo, just visible in the early light. And you realize you're not done. This bed hasn't finished talking. After all, Victorians didn't just hide things in beds. They curated them. There was intention behind each compartment, every drawer, every tucked-away token. What someone chose to conceal beneath their pillow or within the hollow of a post said more than a diary ever could. And today, you're ready to go deeper. You climb down from the bed and circle the frame again, this time with slow, deliberate movements. Your fingers trail along the underside, pressing gently at knots in the wood seams and the trim. You test carvings, wiggle spindles, listen for that telltale click that always precedes a reveal. Near the back leg, almost missed in shadow, you feel it, a carved spiral, not quite like the others. It's flatter, smoother. You press. The floorboard beneath the bed shifts just slightly. Not the bed frame, the floor. You freeze. Then you lift the corner of the rug and discover what can only be described as an architectural smirk, a trapdoor. A small one, barely wider than your shoulders, but clearly part of the room's original design. And suddenly the notion of a secret bed compartment feels wildly insufficient, because this is a bedroom escape hatch. Historians still argue whether such features were used for security scandal or both. In some aristocratic homes, particularly those involved in political intrigue, it wasn't uncommon to design secret passages connected to bedrooms. Often they led to service corridors, priest holes, or concealed stairways. These weren't just legends. They were practical responses to a life of appearances and undercurrents. Victorian England, for all its rigid social codes, was deeply porous beneath the surface. Revolutions stirred in Europe. The industrial age restructured class boundaries. Espionage was not just the domain of statecraft, it thrived in domestic life. And beds, as ever, were at the center of it. One particularly famous example, the Chiswick Escape Suite, commissioned in 1862 by a nervous shipping magnate who feared assassination by his competitors. His bedchamber contained a trapdoor beneath the bed that led to a concealed passage running through the wine cellar and out into the garden. Rumor has it he never used it, but every night he tested the spring before sleep, just in case. Another case comes from Yorkshire, where a series of unrestored townhouses were found to have narrow service tunnels running behind master bedrooms. One in particular included a trapdoor inside the bed frame's baseboard disguised by a slide-out blanket drawer. It was speculated that these passages allowed for emergency escapes or more mundane mischief, such as lovers' rendezvous or discreet exits after dicey dinner parties. And while these might sound sensational, they weren't necessarily rare, especially not among the upper classes who had money to burn and enemies to imagine. You pry open your own trapdoor slowly, the hinges creaking like reluctant bones. Beneath is darkness, just a shallow crawl space about a foot deep with an old iron grate covering a brick shaft. Not a tunnel, not quite, but perhaps ventilation or the beginning of a passage now sealed. Inside the crawl space, though, something catches your eye. A wooden box, roughly the size of a book, untouched by dust. You lift it carefully, heart doing the polite Victorian thing of skipping a beat without drawing attention to itself. The box is latched, but not locked. You open it. Inside, two things. A pressed flower, flat, fragile, and dry as whisper. A pansy, maybe, deep purple faded to umber. A folded scrap of parchment. No envelope, no signature. Just one line written in faded ink. We met only once, but I never stopped thinking about you. You stare at the words for a long time, and you wonder, was this the confession of someone who lived here? Someone whose bed was the only safe place to keep that memory alive? Was this a token of longing, of regret, of rebellion? Whatever the story, the bed has held onto it, quietly, lovingly. It's a reminder that not all secret compartments were for gold or guns. Some were for things far more volatile: feelings. Love was dangerous in Victorian society, especially the kind that didn't align with marriage contracts, class expectations, or gender norms. And so people improvised. They carved little vaults into their furniture, bearing what couldn't be spoken. Beds became emotional time capsules. You replace the box, gently close the trapdoor, and sit back on the edge of the mattress. It feels different now, Heavier maybe, or just more human. Because now you're beginning to understand the Victorian bed wasn't just a structure, it was a stage, a safe, and sometimes a sanctuary. You lie back, the locket beside you, the flower's ghost still blooming in your thoughts, and you let the weight of other people's secrets lull you into sleep. The next morning is all hush and amber. Light filters in through the gauzy curtains like liquid honey pooling gently on the wooden floorboards and bathing the bed in a sleepy kind of reverence. You lie still for a long moment, eyes fixed on the swirls in the carved canopy above the memory of the trapdoor still echoing like a question. You sit up slowly, spine cracking like old parchment. Your body feels rested, but your mind is tangled in thoughts of the pressed flower, the locket, the fading ink. You've begun to think of this bed not just as an object, but as a witness. It's outlived its owners, outlasted fashions, fires, and floods of conversation. And all the while, it's kept quiet. But someone else probably didn't. You start to wonder about the people who really knew what these beds contained. Not their owners, but their caretakers. The ones who scrubbed the linens, turned the mattresses, and dusted the very carvings you've been obsessing over. The servants. In Victorian households, especially those belonging to the middle and upper classes, domestic service was the foundation of daily life. Cooks, scullery maids, housekeepers, butlers, governesses, and more. But no role brought someone closer to the secrets of the bedroom than the lady's maid or the valet, those responsible for dressing, undressing, and maintaining the intimate spaces of their employers. They knew where the jewelry was hidden. They saw which letters arrived at odd hours. They noticed if something was stashed hastily in a drawer, or if a particular book kept being returned to the same hollowed-out spot behind the headboard. And while these servants were paid to be discreet, they were also human. There are recorded cases of maids discovering secret compartments and reporting them not to the family but to other staff. Quiet gossip networks formed below stairs where knowledge was power. The butler knew who snuck in late. The cook knew which drawer held laudanum. And the maid, she knew everything. Historians still argue whether servants ever used these compartments for their own purposes. There's no shortage of fiction, of course. Stories of blackmail, stolen jewels, switched letters, but hard evidence is harder to find. Still, some recovered bed frames tell suggestive tales. In 1978, a Victorian bed was pulled from storage in a Devon estate, slated for auction. During inspection, restorers discovered a false bottom in the footboard. Inside, not valuables, but a tiny leather notebook written in shorthand, and likely penned by a servant. Translated years later, it turned out to be a daily record of the household from the perspective of a lady's maid. Not malicious, not gossip-ridden, just observant, meticulous. In one entry, she wrote, "Mrs. G keeps her tears in the velvet drawer. I dust it, but do not ask." It's that kind of quiet poetry that defines so much of this era. So much was left unsaid, so much encoded into furniture gestures, glances. And the servants floating around the edges of respectability caught it all. Back in your own borrowed bedroom, you lean down and study the carvings again. There's one motif you hadn't paid much attention to before: a pair of small doves etched into the inner leg of the bed frame. Tucked out of sight, almost lazy in their placement. You press one, nothing. You press the other. Click, of course. A section of the frame near the baseboard drops open, just a sliver revealing a thin cavity lined with wool felt. Inside, a black velvet ribbon frayed at the edges, tied tightly around a yellowed scrap of parchment. You hesitate, then untie it. The parchment reads, "You told me to forget, so I did, except the scent, except the sound of your breath in the morning. No name, no date, just another whisper in the archive of this bed." You place the note back gently, retie the ribbon, and close the compartment. The click this time is sharper final. The Victorians didn't need smartphones or passwords to preserve their secrets. They had furniture. Furniture that could listen, hold, protect. Beds that became the physical embodiment of memory, not just their own, but everyone who touched them. It's strange to think about, that while your ancestors slept, their emotions didn't. They were folded, tucked, drawn into the very grain of the wood. And when no one could bear to say things aloud, they let the bed listen. You lie back again, eyes on the doves, and let your breathing fall into rhythm with the quiet creaks of the old house. Maybe that's what these beds were really for, not just sleeping or hiding, but remembering. And maybe that's why, all these years later, they're still whispering. You're beginning to feel like a detective in silk pajamas. By now, every corner of the bed has been investigated, prodded, and coaxed. You've uncovered drawers that vanish into the frame notes, folded into forgotten crevices, and hinges that dare to move only in the quietest moments. You found longing loss, perhaps even love, all embalmed in velvet and varnish. And yet it feels like there's still asterisk one more thing. Because the one area you've avoided, whether by oversight or instinct, is asterisk asterisk under the bed dot asterisk asterisk. Which makes sense, doesn't it? Even in the modern world, under the bed is a liminal place. It's where monsters live, where dust collects, where lost socks and old boxes go to die. But in the Victorian era, it wasn't just a place of avoidance. It was sometimes a place of asterisk, deliberate asterisk design. So this morning you finally gather your courage, kneel beside the frame and lift the heavy bed skirt. What you find is not a body. Good start, but definitely not nothing. The floor beneath the bed is uneven. Not obviously, but enough that a few of the wooden boards seem thicker, almost layered. You wrap your knuckles along one, hollow. With a careful push, you slide one board aside, revealing a narrow dust-lined cavity. Inside a asterisk, asterisk, small leather satchel, asterisk, asterisk, sealed with a tarnished brass buckle. You pull it out and sit back against the wall. Your fingers hesitate just for a breath before you undo the buckle. Inside, a woman's glove, a man's cravat, and a letter. This one isn't poetic, it isn't even romantic. It's practical, ruthless. Keep this hidden. If they come, burn it. If not, you know where to find me, Glasgow, under the name Edwin Heath. You blink. So much for dreamy sentimentalism. This is asterisk, asterisk, escape dot, asterisk, asterisk. Victorians weren't just in love with hiding things, they sometimes used furniture to stage entire vanishing acts. In a society where divorce was nearly impossible and reputation was everything, disappearing could be more logical than confronting scandal. Historians still argue whether this kind of bedroom escape was rare or more common than we think. But anecdotal evidence abounds, particularly in cases involving political dissenters, disgraced heirs, or women fleeing abusive households. Some carpenters even specialized in asterisk dual-purpose furniture asterisk for this very reason. One London firm reportedly offered a line of departure beds featuring built-in compartments for documents, jewelry, and travel funds. They were marketed discreetly, of course, and only by word of mouth. Their slogan for when absence is the better virtue. You have to admire the subtlety. And sometimes it wasn't even about scandal, it was about asterisk, asterisk, safety dot, asterisk, asterisk. In areas plagued by burglary or civil unrest, beds were fortified to guard not just sleep but life. False bottoms for cash, lockable sideboards for weapons, even spring-loaded mechanisms that secured compartments automatically if opened incorrectly. One bizarre example, the Heathmore Guardian, a prototype bed from 1881 that had a hidden drawer accessible asterisk, only asterisk, if the sleeper turned over twice in the same direction. The inventor, a retired locksmith, claimed it reduced theft by at least 60%. Historians agree that it also probably reduced sleep by about the same percentage. You look again at the satchel in your lap, a glove, a cravat, a name. It's not just a story, it's a strategy, a play, a final move made beneath the watchful gaze of carved roses and embroidered pillows. This bed was part of someone's asterisk plan, its asterisk. You place everything back exactly as you found it, reseal the satchel and slide the board shut. The bed makes no sound. It's learned from its owners. You sit cross-legged on the mattress, feeling the entire weight of history settle around you. These secret compartments weren't gimmicks. They weren't eccentric luxuries. They were the asterisk, asterisk architecture of survival. Asterisk, asterisk. Because Victorian society, for all its lace and decorum, was a high-stakes theater. One wrong word could ruin you. One wrong glance could exile you. So people adapted. They found spaces to be their real selves, even if those spaces were no bigger than a drawer under a bed. And maybe that's what you've been uncovering this whole time. Not treasure or scandal, but humanity. You lie back listening to the soft groan of wood warming in the sunlight. The floorboards know, the bed knows, and now, so do you. You don't get out of bed right away today. Instead, you lie there, one arm flung across your forehead like a swooning poet, the other buried under the quilt, and let your thoughts steep like the tea that's probably cooling downstairs. There's a new kind of intimacy between you and this bed now, one forged not in dreams, but in discovery. You know its heartbeat. You've traced its veins with your fingertips. And yet, even with all you've uncovered, there's one question that keeps needling you. Asterisk, asterisk, why weren't these secrets kept somewhere else? Asterisk, asterisk, a drawer in a desk, a hollow book, a painting with a false backing. Why keep your most precious or dangerous items in your asterisk bed? Asterisk. The answer isn't just about convenience, it's about symbolism. Because in the Victorian mind, the bed wasn't merely a piece of furniture. It was asterisk, asterisk, the center of a life cycle dot, asterisk, asterisk. It was where you were born, where you courted, where you died. It witnessed every milestone quietly and without protest. It wasn't just about sleep, it was about asterisk, asterisk, transition dot, asterisk, asterisk. And transitions come with secrets. You finally roll out from under the covers, the floor chill, biting at your toes, and begin the daily ritual of pretending you aren't about to dig around in furniture again. But the moment you pass the bed's side rail, you notice something. One of the carved finials atop a post is slightly asterisk loose. Asterisk. You give it a twist. It unscrews. Of course it does. Inside the hollow, a tightly rolled piece of paper. You slide it out like drawing a breath and unroll it slowly. It's a birth certificate. 1856, female child, no name listed. Just the mother's initials, MH. You pause. The air in the room shifts just slightly. This isn't a love letter. This isn't a coded escape. This is asterisk evidence. Asterisk. Evidence of something unspoken, perhaps even unspeakable. You sit back on the bed, paper in hand, thinking about all the stories wrapped up in initials, in secrets buried beneath sheets and carvings. Maybe this child was born in secret. Maybe she wasn't meant to be found. Maybe the bed wasn't hiding asterisk for asterisk its owner, but asterisk from asterisk them. Historians still argue whether Victorian secrecy was a byproduct of repression or a cultivated art form. Some believe it was the result of rigid moral codes, an entire society clamped shut like a hope chest. Others believe secrecy was part of the thrill, that hiding things gave life a spark it otherwise lacked. Certainly asterisk sleeping spaces asterisk reflected this duplicity. It's no accident that Victorian literature is obsessed with bedrooms. Gothic novels, especially asterisk Wuthering Heights asterisk asterisk, Jane Eyre asterisk asterisk, The Turn of the Screw. Asterisk rely on bedrooms to harbor ghost secrets, forbidden truths. Behind every curtain, another plot twist. Under every bed, a metaphor. And those fictional beds often mirrored their real-world counterparts. Creaky, immense, impossible to move. They weren't simply props, they were characters. Your bed now feels more alive than ever. The carved posts, the velvet-lined crevices, the trapdoor beneath the rug. It's no longer a container, it's an asterisk asterisk repository of choices dot asterisk asterisk, things someone needed to protect, or forget, or bury. And you wonder how many Victorian households contain similar beds. Not museum pieces, not heirlooms. Just old wooden frames with drawers. No one noticed panels, no one pressed compartments, no one dared disturb. A census of hidden lives. There's a fringe theory among some restoration experts that certain carpenters, especially those working with spiritualist clients, deliberately built beds as asterisk boundary objects. Spaces that blurred the line between the physical and the spiritual, the waking and the dreaming. Furniture designed to house asterisk asterisk, not just bodies, but messages dot asterisk asterisk. One bed uncovered in Somerset in the 1990s had over a dozen hollow points. When disassembled, the frame was found to contain slips of paper with odd phrases written in mirror script. The breath remembers. She didn't walk out. She walked asterisk through asterisk. 3 knocks, then silence. No one knows who wrote them or why. But someone somewhere felt that the safest place for those messages was beneath the mattress. Back in your room, you fold the birth record gently and tuck it back inside the finial. You screw it shut and smooth your hand over the wood. You feel it faintly. A kind of humming. Not sound, not movement, just presence. You lie back again, heart heavy in the gentlest way, and realize you're starting to love this bed. Not romantically, not spiritually, but asterisk asterisk relationally dot asterisk asterisk. It has told you the truth, or enough of it to feel real. You close your eyes, letting the light settle across your face, and exhale into the silence. You're not just a guest anymore. You're a witness, and the bed in return is no longer just a bed. It's a asterisk asterisk confessional dot asterisk asterisk. You don't sleep that night. Not because of restlessness or unease, but because the room feels alive. Not haunted exactly, just overly full. As if the stories hidden in the bed have finally unspooled into the air and now linger like pipe smoke or perfume. They move with the draft, they hum under the floorboards. You can almost hear them creaking in time with your breath. And tonight the air smells different. Not dust or coal or lavender, something sharper. Frankincense, wet wool, burnt sugar. You sit up slowly, following your nose. That scent, thick, sweet, ancient, wafts from the base of the headboard. You reach behind it, fingertips grazing the wood, until you find it a narrow seam smaller than any you've found so far. A gentle press, a soft click, a panel swings out. But this time the compartment isn't filled with notes or trinkets. It's lined with glass. A single recessed alcove about the size of a shoebox with a small brass burner affixed to the back. Long extinguished but unmistakable. A tiny oil lamp. Scorch marks on the upper interior wood. Residue from incense. And beside it, a thin leather book bound by a ribbon. You pull it out, carefully aware you've crossed into territory that's more than personal, it's spiritual. You open the book. Its pages are filled with looping script and careful symbols. Latin phrases, astrological diagrams, and most haunting of all passages referencing dream communication, soul travel, and communion with the veiled. Your hands go still. Because this isn't just a hidden drawer. This is a ritual space. It seems absurd at first who builds a spiritual chamber into a bed, but then again who builds 4 secret compartments into a headboard and expects you not to find a candle burner. The answer, it turns out, is Victorian spiritualists. During the 19th century, spiritualism exploded across Britain like a fevered seance. The belief that the dead could communicate with the living gained enormous popularity, especially in drawing rooms and yes, bedrooms. Mediums became fashionable. Seances were hosted by tea light, and ordinary people began integrating mysticism into their everyday spaces. Historians still argue whether the spiritualist craze was sincere or just the product of too much grief, too much repression, and not nearly enough reliable science. Either way, furniture followed the movement. Some beds from the 1860s and 70s have been found with hidden candle alcoves like the one you've just discovered. Spaces used for late-night rituals meant to contact the dead or heighten psychic dreams. These weren't public rituals. They were private, personal, quiet. Beds, after all, were already seen as liminal spaces, half life, half death. You spent hours there, vulnerable, unconscious, suspended. If there was a thin place between this world and the next, many believed the bed was its doorway. You flip through the book's pages, finding more hints. Descriptions of rituals performed at the crossing hour just before dawn. Instructions for sleeping with a loved one's comb beneath your pillow to invite them into your dreams. A scrawled line, the bed remembers even what I cannot. There's something painfully beautiful in that, and perhaps uncomfortably relatable. You set the book down, suddenly aware that you're holding someone's hopes, their grief, maybe their madness. Because spiritualism in this era wasn't just about ghosts, it was about control. In a world that was changing fast, where medicine was unreliable, mortality was everywhere, and roles were rigid, spiritual rituals offered the illusion of agency. If you could speak to the dead, you hadn't truly lost them. If your bed could become a sanctuary for the soul, then even sleep wasn't surrender. Back in the compartment, you find one more item, a ring. Simple, silver, inscribed on the inside with just one word, wait. That single word makes your breath catch. You don't know if it was a message to someone else or a reminder to the person who wore it. Maybe both, but it feels heavy with meaning, like it spent a lifetime in silence waiting for you to read it. You close the book, replace it gently in the glass-lined recess, and seal the compartment. The scent lingers in the room, frankincense and something softer now. Maybe the smell of candle smoke clinging to wool, or just memory made tactile. And the bed, it doesn't feel eerie anymore. It feels consecrated. A place of ritual, of remembering, of reaching. You lie back under the quilt not to sleep, but to reflect, to honor, to listen. Because now you understand some secret compartments weren't made to hide things. They were made to protect moments. Moments when the veil thinned, when someone reached into the dark hoping for an answer. When a bed became more than a piece of furniture, it became a bridge. And tonight you sleep with the quiet certainty that someone longed before you tried to cross it. It's the next morning, and for the first time since your arrival, the sky is startlingly clear. No fog, no drizzle, just pale sunlight spilling across the bed like a kind hand on your shoulder. You stretch beneath the weight of thick Victorian blankets, now somehow lighter after what you uncovered last night. You slept well. Or maybe the bed decided to let you. Either way, you feel different. You sit up slowly, careful not to disturb the quiet, as if the bed is still meditating. Your gaze drifts toward the headboard, toward the hidden compartment you now know houses incense and ink, dreams and ghosts. You almost feel the urge to apologize for opening it, like interrupting someone's prayer mid-whisper. But beds, like people, are made to hold things. And sometimes they're made to share them too. You get up, wrap a shawl around your shoulders, and pad over to the window. Outside, the street is nearly empty. Just one milk cart and a boy chasing a hat that seems determined to become a bird. You smile faintly. Even in an era obsessed with formality, whimsy sneaks through. Behind you, the bed creaks faintly and you turn. The room, once heavy with secrets, now feels like it's exhaled. You decide to take a break from pulling the frame apart. Let it rest. Instead, you shift your focus to something that's been quietly tugging at your curiosity for days. The way Victorians understood sleep itself. Because the more you learn, the more you realize these secret compartments weren't just a reaction to crime or sentimentality. They were designed for a time when sleep was considered dangerous. Yes, really. Victorians held an odd relationship with unconsciousness. On the one hand, sleep was essential, a cornerstone of health and virtue. On the other hand, it was risky, mysterious. Even medical texts of the time wobbled between reverence and suspicion. Some believed sleep was when the soul temporarily left the body. Others argued it was the time the devil made his best arguments. Still others suggested it was a moment when the brain was most open to external influence, be it divine, scientific, or social. The result, an era of astonishing overcompensation. Beds were positioned based on magnetic harmonies. Some physicians advised placing beds north-south to align with the Earth's poles. Others warned against mirrors facing the bed, as they could confuse the soul during re-entry. Many Victorians believed dreams were more than internal processes. They were messages either from the divine, the dead, or the subconscious, though that term wasn't quite in style yet. Some homes even employed dream journals as part of morning routines, not for whimsy, but for diagnosis. You recall one medical treatise from 1874 that claimed, recurring images of water or birds may indicate a deficiency in the blood or an unconfessed longing. Freud would have had a field day. And so it's no wonder that beds became sacred objects. Not just sites of rest, but battlegrounds for health, morality, and the occasional spiritual chess match. It also helps explain the explosion in sleep-related contraptions during the period. There were bed clamps to ensure posture, head straps to maintain upright dreaming, weighted blankets for the restless soul, early sound machines made of clockwork and chimes, even perfumed pillow sachets advertised to prevent nightmares by inviting pleasing images. Some beds had built-in compartments not for valuables, but for herbs, salts, and medicinal blends thought to shape dreams. Lavender, thyme, frankincense, opium, yes, even that were tucked into sachets and stored inside headboards or under pillows. You suddenly remember the faint aroma you noticed the first night you arrived, sweet, slightly musky, not quite definable. Was that just a lingering scent, or someone's dream prescription? Historians still debate how effective these practices were, but effectiveness in many ways misses the point. What mattered was intention, and intention was everywhere. In every tucked sachet, every hidden drawer, every silver ring engraved with a single haunting word. You glance again at the headboard's hollow, now resealed. You wonder if the person who built that ritual space ever actually saw a ghost, or if the very act of preparing the space, setting the burner, pressing the oil, whispering into linen was enough to feel closer to something beyond. And maybe that's the most Victorian thing of all. To believe that devotion, discipline, and a carved compartment could hold back the mysteries of the night. That if you built your bed just right, you could protect your body, soothe your mind, and catch your soul when it wandered back home. You return to the mattress and sit for a moment, fingertips grazing the quilt stitching. This bed, with its creaks and sighs, its hollows and hushed corners, has held so many stories. But perhaps the greatest secret it holds isn't a hidden drawer or folded paper. It's the idea that sleep itself, the most ordinary act of human life, might be something worth guarding. In this bed, it's been standing guard a long, long time. You've started listening differently. Not just with your ears, but with your fingertips, your breath, even your posture. Every creak of the floorboard, every soft click in the wood, every hush of wind curling beneath the windowsill, it all seems like part of a greater language. The bed is no longer just a thing in the room. It is the room. And today, your curiosity drifts not toward drawers or symbols, but toward the science, or what passed for science in Victorian England, of how the bed could become a machine, a diagnostic tool, a medical apparatus. Yes, the Victorians, in their endless desire to combine form with function, didn't just hide their valuables in beds. They hid diagnostics. You first encounter the idea while flipping through an old medical pamphlet tucked in a cracked volume on the sitting room's bookshelf. Its title reads, Somatic study and restive behavior in the domestic sleeper, observations and devices. Catchy. You skim. The contents are both laughable and disturbingly earnest. In it, a physician details several techniques for observing problem sleepers during the night. Among them, beds with mechanical levers that recorded how often a person rolled over, headboards with chalk marks to track head movement, springs tied to tension wires that could indicate night terrors, guilt, or the early onset of melancholia. That's right, Victorians invented an early version of the sleep tracker, only instead of Bluetooth and apps, it was gears and guilt. You return to your room with new eyes. What if the carved spirals weren't decorative but functional? What if some of the bed's groans weren't aging wood, but design resistance? What if you've been monitored this whole time? Your hands begin to examine the base of the bedpost where they meet the floor. One of them isn't flush. It sits at a slight angle, as though recently disturbed. You crouch fingers, brushing the joint. There, a metal ring embedded in the wood, barely visible. You hook a finger through and pull. A narrow panel slides free from the base of the post. And behind it, a cylinder of rolled parchment tightly wound and capped with wax. You remove it, pry open the seal, and unroll the contents. It's a sleep journal, not yours, someone else's, long ago. Each entry is brief dated, no names, just observations. Second night, 3 movements, shifted to left side at 2:14 a.m. Fourth night, shallow breaths, no speech, right arm twitched at dawn. Seventh night, whimpering, spoke name aloud, do not recognize it. The handwriting is precise, clinical, but the pattern it forms is unmistakable. Someone was watching, recording, possibly experimenting. You sit back on the floor, pulse drumming faintly in your throat, because suddenly the bed doesn't just feel sacred, it feels surveilled. This wasn't just a container of secrets, it was a lab. You begin to imagine the person who kept this log, perhaps a doctor, or a husband desperate to understand his wife's illness, or a parent afraid of what their child whispered in sleep. Whatever the reason, it reflects the period's growing obsession with measurable behavior. Because while the Victorians loved symbolism, they also craved data. This was the age of phrenology, galvanism, mesmerism. The idea that the mind and body could be studied, recorded, tamed. In the bed, it became a stage for that control. Historians still debate the extent to which these practices were common. But we know at least a handful of patent applications during the 1880s described bed enhancements that allowed for passive monitoring. Some included pressure-sensitive springs. Others featured pendulum mechanisms that would record movement using small pieces of soot-covered paper, so the more you tossed and turned, the more marks appeared. In one tragic case from 1889, a woman's erratic sleep patterns were recorded nightly by her physician husband. When she later disappeared, the court used his notes to argue she had pre-existing instability based on how much she rolled over. You stare at the scroll again. Not judgmental, just sad. Because while we often think of beds as places of rest, this kind of bed was also a place of observation. It makes you wonder how many people in how many homes lay down to sleep, thinking they were alone, only to be measured in the dark. You carefully roll the parchment and place it back where you found it. The panel closes with a gentle snick, as if even now the bed is keeping your secret safe. And when you lie back down, you feel it again, that strange awareness. Not uncomfortable, not invasive, but alert. The bed doesn't just remember, it notices. And tonight, as you drift into sleep, you realize something unexpected. You're okay with that. Because sometimes being watched isn't about control. Sometimes it's about being witnessed. And in a world as lonely and layered as Victorian England, perhaps that was all some people ever wanted. You dream of feathers, thousands of them, swirling like snow in a room with no walls. The only sound is a ticking clock, impossibly far away, and the soft creak of something settling. You float, turning slowly in the air while beds drift past like ships. Some are canopied, some are carved. Some look suspiciously like coffins. All of them seem to be waiting. When you wake, the light is gentle. You feel a little disoriented, not from lack of sleep, but from the sense that your dreams have joined the story now. That this bed has in its quiet way begun recording you too. You sit up and stretch, then swing your legs over the side of the mattress and plant your feet on the floorboards. They're warm. Or perhaps just holding the memory of all the feet that have come before yours. You're halfway through tying your robe when it hits you. Victorians didn't invent the secret compartment. They just made it fashionable. And they did so at a time when secrets weren't just protected, they were marketed. You cross to the bookshelf again, half expecting it to produce something else convenient. And as if in agreement, it yields a catalog, slim, brown with age, the cover labeled Wickham and Sons Domestic Furnishings of Discretion and Distinction, 1879. You sit at the writing desk, open the cover, and begin to leaf through. The first few pages are typical enough: upholstered chairs, curtained wardrobes, water closets designed to resemble side tables. But halfway through, things get interesting. There's a bed titled The Windsor Sleep Guard, boasting 4 drawers, 2 velvet-lined cavities, and a footboard chamber suitable for flat documents or flatware. Another, The Lady's Confidence, which includes a mirrored panel with folding drawers sealed from view when canopy is closed. And one simply labeled The Guiltless Rest. Its copy reads, "For the modern gentleman who prefers to sleep surrounded by certainty, not suspicion. Hidden drawer accessible only from the left for reasons known to no one but himself." You smile despite yourself, because now the picture is fully forming. This wasn't just secrecy out of necessity. This was secrecy as identity, as luxury, as trend. Victorians, ever theatrical, ever attuned to appearances, turned even their need for privacy into a performative gesture. These beds weren't just built for hiding, they were built to imply hiding, to signal that you might have something to conceal, to invite intrigue without ever revealing the truth. It was in its way the birth of mystery as marketing, and it worked. Anecdotal letters from the air mention these beds with reverence, even envy. One diary entry reads, "Lady Pembroke has acquired one of those infernal mystery beds from Wickham and Sons. She claims it makes her sleep better. I suspect it simply makes her feel cleverer." Historians still argue how widespread this phenomenon was. Were these catalogs common? Were these beds affordable? Or were they the equivalent of buying a tricked-out luxury car today, a way of saying I have taste, and also something you'll never quite understand? What's clear is this: the hidden became aspirational. In the bed, once merely a place to lay your head, became a kind of stage for suspense. You return to your own bed, now catalog still in hand, and sit at the edge thoughtfully. You've lost track of how many compartments this one contains. 4, 5, 7. It hardly matters now, because it isn't about the number of drawers, it's about what they represent. Control, curiosity, the thrill of knowing something no one else does. You lean back, fingers trailing along the carved scrolls again, feeling the subtle variations in the wood grain. No new seams reveal themselves, no hidden levers. But you get the sense that if there were more, the bed would show you in its own time. Victorians weren't in a rush after all. They built furniture to last. They carved meaning slowly. They designed objects to be unlocked only by those who truly needed them. And maybe that's what you've become, not just a guest or an intruder, but someone the bed has decided to show itself to. It's flattering and a little unnerving, like being trusted with someone's diary after they've passed. You lie back, catalog beside you, and think about how much effort went into this kind of discretion. Not just the building of the compartments, but the choosing of them. Which panel would hold the love letter? Which drawer would carry the locket? Which finial would protect the birth record that was never meant to be found? These choices weren't random, they were ritual. And so, this bed, your bed for now, is more than a collection of wooden stuffing. It is a curated space, a museum of secrets, a product of an age that wanted desperately to control what it revealed and when. You pull the blanket up, feel its weight across your chest, and whisper to no one in particular, "Thank you for trusting me." And from the canopy above, one tassel sways just slightly. You close your eyes, catalog resting like a relic on your stomach, and drift into dreams filled with keys that fit nowhere, and doors that open only when no one's looking. You wake to the sound of distant hooves and a church bell that insists it's still important. The bed as usual greets you like an old friend who's seen too much but never brings it up unless asked. You run your palm along the quilt, half expecting it to whisper, ready for more. You are, but not in the way you expected. Because today the compartments feel safe, no longer mysterious, no longer coy. They're not calling to be opened, not this morning. Instead, your curiosity turns outward, toward a question that's been tiptoeing at the edge of your awareness for days. What if beds weren't just protectors of secrets, but accomplices in rebellion? You sit upright, rubbing sleep from your eyes. Let's get strange. Victorian England was not, despite its lace and poetry, a gentle era. It was full of tension, upheaval, cracks behind wallpaper. Everything looked tidy on the surface, but underneath, people ran, people hid, people resisted, and some of them did so from the safety of their beds. You head downstairs. The maid nods politely and offers tea, but you wave her off and retreat to the back parlor where an old trunk sits beneath the window. Inside, you find what you didn't know you were looking for: a battered collection of newspapers and clippings, bundled with twine, dated between 1867 and 1885. You spread them on the table and start scanning. There it is. A small article from the Morning Herald dated 1871. Authorities suspect that a known dissenter eluded capture by concealing herself beneath the floorboards of her own bed, the cavity discovered only after her disappearance. The compartment was expertly constructed with air holes drilled discreetly behind the headboard. No further details have been disclosed. You sit back, not just hiding objects, hiding people. You return upstairs and look at your bed differently now. Not just as a container, not even as a witness, but as a participant. Historians still argue whether beds were truly used as political hiding places or whether the occasional case like this was exaggerated for dramatic flair. But evidence exists, especially in households tied to political unrest, religious dissent, or revolutionary movements. Catholic families, particularly during earlier periods of British history, were known for having priest holes, secret chambers, to hide clergy during persecution. In some cases, these were hidden in walls. In others, beneath beds. But by the Victorian era, hiding places evolved. One recorded instance from 1874 describes a bed in Liverpool built with a double frame, the interior of which could shelter a person lying completely flat. The mechanism was disguised beneath a folding spring mattress, with the upper frame held in place by small recessed locks, only accessible from within. It was used reportedly to protect a local activist suspected of distributing anti-colonial pamphlets. Another example, found in the notes of a Quaker household in 1880, describes a canopy bed with a false back panel behind which a narrow vertical space allowed someone to stand or crouch during raids. The panel was soundproofed with layered felt. According to the letter, the bed kept our sister hidden for a full day and night. No one thought to look inside. You run your hand along the back of your own headboard now, not for secrets, for space. And though you don't find anything new, you're left with a powerful impression that the line between furniture and strategy was thin. The Victorians, for all their corsets and codes, were no strangers to subtle defiance. They just preferred it tucked in velvet, sealed behind latches, framed in walnut and mahogany. Even literature got in on the act. In a serialized novel published under the pseudonym E.M. Derryfield, the heroine escapes an arranged marriage by locking herself into her own bed, which has been fitted with secret compartments for food and correspondence. It's melodramatic, it's absurd. It became wildly popular, and readers knew what it was saying. Sometimes when society won't let you leave through the front door, you build a tunnel beneath the duvet. You sit on your own bed now, feet dangling slightly, and think about what rebellion looked like in this world. It wasn't banners, it wasn't shouting, it was compartmentalized. A glove hidden under a pillow, a map folded behind a drawer, a woman pressing her hand against the inside of a hollow headboard, holding her breath as footsteps echo on the stairs. These were quiet resistances, and the bed, massive, warm, immobile, became their accomplice. It makes you wonder how many revolutions began on soft pillows, how many escape plans were rehearsed beneath embroidered quilts, and how many people left behind secrets so carefully hidden that we're still discovering them 150 years later. You lie back again, heartbeats, slow body aligned with the grain of old wood and older stories. Because in the right hands and the right house, a bed is not just for sleep, it's for strategy. You don't so much wake the next morning as emerge slowly, reluctantly from a kind of gentle suspension. The bed has let you go, but just barely. You blink up at the canopy, expecting it to blink back. It doesn't, but the carved lion's paw at the corner seems a little smug this morning. Fair enough. You swing your legs over the side toes, brushing the rug, and think, if beds were accomplices in rebellion, what else were they capable of? Because here's a darker, sharper idea that's been forming at the edges of your thoughts. What if some beds were built for escape, not hiding but fleeing? The kind of beds that didn't just store a pistol or a love letter, but opened into trapdoors, tunnels, or even escape routes. The kind of furniture that whispered, not keep it secret, but get out now. You kneel once again at the footboard, running your hand along the curve of the wood, like you've done a dozen times before. But now your focus is different, not on drawers or hinges, but on pressure points. And there it is. On the back side of the leg, low to the ground, a carved knot in the wood that isn't symmetrical. You press it. There's a dull thunk. The bed doesn't move, but the floor beneath it does. A section tilts downward ever so slightly, just a finger-width crack. You pull back the rug. The floorboard under the left side of the bed has dropped a fraction of an inch, revealing a small iron ring embedded in the edge. You take a breath, hook your fingers through and lift. What opens isn't a full passage. It's more like a vertical tunnel lined with stone barely wide enough to fit your shoulders. A set of steep wooden rungs disappears into darkness. The smell that rises is cool, old, and unmistakably earthen. You blink. Well, that escalated. This is no compartment. This is an exit. You don't climb down. Not yet. Instead, you sit on the edge of the bed again, heart thudding just fast enough to notice and consider the implications. Because while trapdoors under beds seem like the stuff of fiction's secret societies, runaway lovers, smuggler kings, there's plenty of historical precedent to suggest they weren't purely imagination. Victorian homes, especially country manors and older urban townhouses, were often built atop servant tunnels, coal chutes, or retrofitted priest holes dating back to the 16th and the 17th centuries. In some cases, these were repurposed by later generations into escape routes. There's the case of Lady Winthrop, for example, an eccentric suffragette who, when threatened with arrest during a protest crackdown in 1882, reportedly vanished from her locked bedroom. Authorities eventually found a hidden shaft beneath her bed, leading to a wine cellar complete with a change of clothes and a bicycle. She was found 2 counties away 3 days later, giving a speech. In the more secretive the household, the more political, the more religious, the more scandal-prone, the more likely it was to commission beds or chambers with emergency exits. Historians still argue whether these trapdoors were common features or one-off oddities. But one thing is certain: they existed, and many were so well constructed, so cleverly disguised that they weren't discovered for decades sometimes, not until houses were demolished. One home in Kent, restored in 1994, revealed a concealed shaft beneath the master bedroom bed that led to a drainage tunnel. It was theorized that it had once been used by a member of a political secret society during the 1870s. Another, found in Edinburgh, opened to a narrow stairwell carved into stone leading not outside, but to a tiny underground study containing nothing but a desk, a single chair, and stacks of unsent letters. You glance back toward your own opening. It's not large, not glamorous, but it exists. And the very fact of its existence changes the tone of everything else you've discovered. Because now the locket, the glove, the birth record, the incense chamber, the list of nocturnal observations. They're not just fragments of someone's private life. They're pieces of a plan, an escape plan. Maybe emotional, maybe physical, maybe both. This bed wasn't just a keeper of secrets. It was a safety net. And what's more Victorian than that, to build beauty and burden into the same object. To create something ornate, ceremonial, delicate, and then tuck a trapdoor beneath it. You let the hatch fall closed gently, the latch resetting with a soft, metallic sigh. No dust kicks up, no dramatic creak, just silence, stillness. Like the bed is saying, that was just between us. You sit back, eyes scanning the carvings again. Now they look like instructions, warnings, routes, and you wonder how many others built their lives on a foundation that could collapse by choice into freedom. How many sleepers rehearsed their escape with one foot always on the floor? How many said goodnight with a bag packed in the compartment below? Because in a world that demanded stillness, some people prepared to move. And the ones who knew what to build, built beds that could carry them into the dark and out. You don't climb down into the tunnel that day. You don't need to. It's enough to know it's there, silent, ready, waiting. The presence of it shifts something fundamental in the way you move through the room. You feel like you're standing on a stage built atop trapdoors, cue cards, and back exits. And this bed, your midnight confidant, your whispering co-archivist, has one more story to share. You just don't expect it to involve children. The rain returns that afternoon. It patters softly against the window panes, a lullaby of gray. You're sitting in the armchair now, the one with springs that threaten to mutiny if you shift too fast, flipping through the same old household inventory ledger that's been gathering dust by the fireplace. Nothing special at first. And then, tucked in the back, pressed between 2 sheets of yellowing paper, you find a child's drawing. Crude, done in charcoal and a dull green pencil. It shows a bed, a 4-poster, unmistakable, with what appears to be a little stick figure crawling inside it. Not on top, inside. You blink, turn the paper over. Written in looping, hesitant script. My hiding bed, Mama doesn't know. A chill trails lightly down your back. Not fear exactly, just the sudden awareness that children too knew how to keep secrets. Or needed to. You return to the bed and drop to your knees, scanning for anything child height. And sure enough, under the frame, hidden beneath a scalloped edge of wood and tucked against the rear left leg, you find a small sliding panel. Inside, a hollowed space no wider than a shoebox. and in it 2 tiny objects, a wooden whistle and a porcelain button shaped like a bird. That's all. No note, no name, just tokens, forgotten or left intentionally. Either way, it hits harder than any locket or love letter. Because this compartment wasn't about romance, escape, or rebellion. It was about protection. You sit back gently, closing the panel again, and let the silence settle. Victorian children were rarely given privacy. Rooms were often shared belongings, inspected behavior, tightly policed. But that didn't mean they didn't crave it. And when a child finds sanctuary, it's usually in the most instinctive, least questioned space beneath the bed. But this child, they didn't just crawl under the bed, they made it theirs. Historians still argue how much autonomy Victorian children actually had. Some were little adults pressed into decorum and duty from age 5. Others were coddled, shielded, endlessly dressed and redressed by nannies. But very few were offered real emotional privacy. So they found it themselves. One recovered journal from 1878, written by a housemaid in Gloucestershire, contains this note. Master Thomas hides in the foot of his bed frame when he is scolded. Says he is traveling to Egypt by headboard. I leave him biscuits when the cook doesn't see. Another letter from a governess in Yorkshire, 1863. Miss Eliza has built a kingdom beneath her mattress. Dolls and ribbons. She told me there is a queen in the headboard who keeps her safe. It seems laughable at first until you remember the world they were growing up in. Disease, early death, strict morality, limited affection. Sometimes the only place to be wild, messy, honest was in a hidden nook, a secret drawer, a tiny velvet-lined box no adult could reach. And some parents even encouraged it. A small design trend appeared in the late 1880s among wealthy households, child safes built into bed frames. Decorative, yes, but also meant to give children a space to store treasures. Miniature compartments, lockable if possible, made to look like part of the carving. Few survive intact today, either broken, removed, or simply grown out of. But the idea lingers. You run your hand along the base of your own bed's frame again, this time gently, lovingly. Because suddenly the bed isn't just a repository of adult secrets. It's a cradle of childhood. It held their fears, their hopes, their secret treasures. And it did so quietly, unfailingly. The little bird button and the whistle tell you more than any diary could. They tell you this bed was once a fort, a hiding place, a magic portal, a retreat. And it reminds you that not all secrets are heavy. Some are light, small enough to fit in a child's pocket, carried like a talisman, hidden just deep enough to feel like a real secret, but not so deep they couldn't come back for it. You replace the objects with the same care you'd handle a living bird, close the panel, and lie back on the mattress. It's warmer now, not in temperature, in tone. Because now you understand this bed hasn't just witnessed sorrow and scandal. It's also sheltered wonder, play, the quiet dignity of a child learning how to keep something safe. You close your eyes and for the first time you dream not of feathers or ladders or latches, but of laughter. Of a child tapping twice on a post and whispering, "Open sesame," and the bed, old and wise, smiling beneath its velvet skirts. The room is quieter now, not the brittle silence of secrets withheld, but a softer hush like a story nearing its close. You sit up slowly, quilt wrapped around your shoulders, and stare at the bed as if seeing it for the first time. But of course you're not. You've seen beneath it, inside it, through it. This isn't just furniture anymore. It's a living memory palace, a body built of wood and whisper. And like all good bodies, it has a heart. Which is why you turn now finally toward the headboard. Not the carvings, not the compartments, but the central panel, the largest part of the whole structure. You've studied it before. Run your fingers across its polished surface. But something always held you back from pressing there. Today, you don't hesitate. You lean in and knock once, then again. And on the third try, it shifts. The center of the headboard folds outward. Not a drawer, not a hatch, a door. Hinged on one side, thin and delicate like a cabinet panel, it reveals a recess deeper than you imagine. Inside a book, thicker than the others. Bound in leather that's faded to the color of dried leaves, tied shut with a faded ribbon that frays in your hands as you untie it. You open the cover. Inside, page after page of careful, steady handwriting. Not observations, not rituals, not confessions, but instructions. If you have found this, then perhaps the bed has chosen you. It reads like a manual, or a will, or both. There are 7 known compartments. You may have found fewer or more. Each was built to hold something of significance to its owner. Do not disturb what you do not understand. This bed was constructed by Elias Thornbury in 1872. It is the only one of its kind. It is not to be sold. Your breath catches. Elias Thornbury, you've heard the name before. A furniture maker whispered about in journals and servant letters. The man who crafted beds for those with intentions too delicate or too dangerous to entrust to a drawer. The man who was rumored to carve secrets into the very grain of his wood. You turn the page. The first compartment holds grief, the second memory, the third a door, the fourth a dream, the fifth a plan, the sixth a prayer, the seventh, but the page is torn. A clean tear, deliberate, as if the writer didn't trust even the paper. The rest of the book is blank. You sit back on the bed, pulse quiet but steady. This isn't just storytelling anymore. You've stumbled into a design of intention. This bed wasn't just made to hide. It was made to test. You wonder how many people over the decades have slept here never knowing. How many felt a presence but dismissed it as old furniture settling. How many sensed something beneath them, behind them, inside the very frame, but never looked closer. And then, how many were chosen, as the book says? Historians still argue whether Thornbury was truly a visionary or just a myth wrapped in walnut and rumor. But if this bed is any proof, he was something else entirely, a craftsman of meaning. Because what he built wasn't simply a hiding place for valuables. It was a vault for human experience, for sorrow, for longing, for strategy, for ritual, for childhood, for escape. And now you're part of it. This bed doesn't belong to you. It never did. You belong to it. You gently replace the book, close the panel, and run your hand across the smooth wood like you might comfort a friend after a long confession. The grain is warm, honest. You understand now that the point was never to find everything. The point was to be invited to try. You lie back, quilt rising over your chest, and feel the weight of the bed settle beneath you. Not heavy, not suffocating, but anchoring, like a ship that has dropped its final mooring. And in that moment you feel it, not sound, not breath, just a pause in the air, like the bed has exhaled, like it's done. You close your eyes and whisper, thank you. Because whatever it was built to protect, to witness, to hold, has now passed through you. And that's enough. You sleep deeply that night, tucked in by silence, in the sense that, for the first time, the bed is sleeping too. It no longer feels like it's watching or waiting. It simply is, a presence at peace, a keeper content with what it has revealed. And in your dreams, nothing hidden, no doors, no drawers, just a field. Sunlight warm and simple. You wake late. Mid-morning has already claimed the room, the light no longer golden, but ivory and honest. You stretch fingers, brushing the edge of the quilt, and know that there is still one last question pressing at the corners of your mind. You've explored secrets born from fear, from love, from rebellion, even from faith. But what about those born from legacy? You sit up and pull the locket from your nightstand, now familiar but still unspeaking. That photograph, the woman in profile, always watching some point beyond the frame. You whisper to her softly, who were you saving all this for? Because that's the thing about hiding something well, you usually don't plan to come back for it. You hope someone else will. And that's what turns this bed from an object of secrecy into an object of inheritance. You begin looking not for more compartments, but for names, traces, clues of a handoff, a passing of the torch. You return to the small chest at the foot of the bed, the one you once dismissed as just decorative. Today you check the inside of the lid, and there, faint and faded, is a scratched engraving. To L, so she'll know where I've been. That's it. No surname, no date, just the initial. But it's enough, because it means that someone long before you didn't just hide things. They prepared them. Not for themselves, for someone after. Historians still debate how intentional this kind of preservation was. Did Victorians truly leave secrets for others to find, or were these artifacts simply forgotten? Accidents of history. But when you find messages like this, small, deliberate, and echoing across time, it's hard not to believe in design. And Victorian society, for all its rigidity, was deeply aware of legacy. Names mattered, reputation mattered, lineage mattered. So did remembrance. That's why so many people were buried with lockets, letters, handkerchiefs embroidered with initials. Why even modest households had cabinets filled with remains, not of people, but of presence. A glove, a brush, a note that didn't need to be read, just touched. You take the locket, wrap it carefully in linen, and return it to the compartment where you first found it. You slide the panel closed gently. It clicks back into place with a softness that feels final. You're not hiding it, you're returning it. Because now you understand the most powerful secrets aren't the ones we bury to protect ourselves. They're the ones we tuck away for someone else to find. The bed creaks as you sit once more at its edge. Not ominous, not dramatic, just alive. You feel a shift in yourself too, as though you've moved from student to steward. This isn't just a story you've uncovered, it's one you're now a part of. You glance down at your own hands, then around the room at the dresser, the chair, the curtain gently dancing in the breeze. All still, all watching. You reach for your notebook and begin to write not just what you found, but what you felt. You map the compartments, record the order in which they were discovered. Describe the scent of the incense, the chill of the whistle, the weight of the hidden escape shaft. Not for yourself, for whoever comes next, because someone will. This house may change hands, the furniture may shift, but this bed, this beautiful, burdened, brilliant bed will remain. And one day someone else will find it. Press a knot, hear a click, smell a mystery. And when they do, you want them to know they're not alone. They've joined a story, one that isn't finished, one that doesn't end even when the last drawer closes. You tuck the notebook beneath the mattress. Not too deep, just deep enough. And then you make the bed smooth, the quilt fluff, the pillows. The final ritual. And when you close the door behind you, you don't look back. You don't need to, because the bed knows. And now so do you. You leave the room, but the room doesn't quite leave you. Even as your steps echo down the narrow wooden hallway, you feel the bed's presence lingering behind, like a quiet breath, one that continues without you. Not dependent, just ongoing. Outside, the morning light tastes like brass and baked stone. A lamplighter you hadn't noticed earlier hums as he extinguishes the last of the gas lights. The town is stirring with the slow rhythm of carriages, coal smoke, and yesterday's gossip. But your mind is still upstairs, still listening for creaks, still pressing your thumb into imagined knots in the wood. You stop at the end of the hall, glancing toward a parlor where your hosts sit, with their tea oblivious to the secrets buried in their own guest room. Or maybe not. Maybe they've never had the right kind of eyes, or the right kind of quiet. You're beginning to think some beds only reveal themselves when someone truly needs them to. That would explain a lot. And it raises a new idea, one you can't quite shake. What if these beds weren't just Victorian indulgences? What if some of them are still out there? You walk into town that day with that thought ringing quietly in the background. You wander into a second-hand bookshop, then a furniture restoration studio. You speak to an old man polishing a cracked bedpost in the back. And when you casually ask whether he's ever seen a compartment hidden in a headboard, he doesn't laugh. He just says, "You mean like a drawer, or like the sort where they left letters for the ones they loved but couldn't keep?" You freeze. He doesn't look up, just keeps polishing. "There was a bed like that down in Dover," he continues. "Sold after the family went to Canada. Man who bought it found a velvet box behind the footboard, inside a miniature portrait of a child. No one knew who she was, but the new owner kept the box where it was." He finally looks at you and shrugs. Some things aren't meant to be claimed, just carried. You thank him, heart thudding in that old familiar rhythm again, and step back out into the light. It's not just your bed. There are others. The idea sits in your chest like a warm coal. Beds that remember. Beds that protect. Beds that record. The more you look, the more you start seeing signs at antique shops, estate auctions, quiet country inns, beds with too-thick headboards, odd seams in the frame, a strange resistance in one carved rosette when you press. You don't open them, not yet, you don't need to, because this isn't about exposing every secret. It's about honoring the spaces that hold them. Historians still argue how many active memory beds, as some folklorists now call them, actually exist. The term isn't academic, not really. It's whispered, shared, passed among restorers, collectors, people who treat old furniture like old friends. There are stories of beds that sang when open, that creaked only when no one was near, that refused to burn. And while you're not here to chase ghosts, you begin to understand something essential. Memory lives in objects, especially the ones that never leave a room. You start keeping a little black notebook, not unlike the one you found. In it, you jot down dates, sketches, names, sometimes dreams, sometimes just feelings. A hunch maybe, a place where the grain of the wood fell off. It's not obsession, it's respect. Because now you recognize these beds when you see them, not by design, by presence. And always when you find one, you do the same thing. You sit on the edge of the mattress, take a deep breath and whisper, If you have something to say, I'm listening. Sometimes nothing happens. Sometimes a panel shifts, a latch sighs, a velvet pouch yields a memory. And sometimes, most beautifully, nothing is there but the imprint of a head, the shape of a back, and the faintest smell of frankincense sealed forever into the grain. You don't keep anything you find. You place it back. Because this isn't your story. You're just passing through. And that you've learned is enough. The days pass and you travel, town to town, village to seaside. You sleep in inns that used to be manors cottages, that used to be inns and houses that seem older than time itself. But everywhere you go, you ask the same quiet question. May I see the bed? And most people smile, shrug, or give a vaguely confused nod. They think you're an enthusiast, a collector, maybe a little odd. You don't mind, because once you're alone in the room, the work begins. Not loud work, not invasive. You don't strip mattresses or saw through frames. You simply listen, watch, breathe with the furniture. Let your fingers find what your eyes don't. Sometimes you find nothing but creaks and cobwebs. But other times, a drawer slides open with no key. A tassel pulls a panel aside. A letter flutters out from between slats like a leaf on the wind. These are the other beds, the cousins, the kin, not all made by Thornbury, but perhaps inspired by him or simply born from the same impulse, the need to remember in silence. In one farmhouse in Sussex, you find a footboard that opens to reveal a hollow stuffed with sheet music and a child's ballet slipper. In a seaside inn in Dorset, you discover a nightstand drawer fused into the headboard itself, filled with smooth pebbles, wrapped in old parchment, a collection, a ritual, a love story in geology. None of these are labeled, none explained. But each time you find one, you open your notebook, draw a sketch, describe the contents, and then always you leave everything exactly where it was. Because what you're building isn't a collection, it's a map. A map of the unspoken, the tucked away the soft things that once mattered fiercely and now only matter quietly. Historians, if they were to read your notes, might scoff. These aren't grand discoveries. No coins, no royal signatures, no treasures by academic standards. But you've started using a different word for them. You call them echoes. And you're beginning to think that's the most valuable thing of all. You begin to connect with others. A woodworker in York who once found a prayer folded into a bedpost. A housekeeper in Bath who swears the guest room canopy smells like peppermint and tears, no matter how many times it's washed. A historian in Edinburgh who insists there was once a bed that whispered, but only in Latin. You all speak the same language now, the language of furniture that remembers. You exchange letters, sketches, even little samples, scented ribbons, copied diagrams, a thumb-sized wooden plug that turns out to be a stopper from a hollow dowel in a child's bed in Liverpool. And slowly the community forms. Not officially, not with forums or logos or subscriptions. Just names, shared in confidence, passed like folklore. If you're ever in Bristol, ask for the Blue Room at the Anchor House. The post on the left has a knot that isn't. Try the guest room above the bakery in Kendal. Look beneath the third slat. Bring a pencil. Somehow this all begins to feel more real than any archive or museum ever has. Because it isn't about preservation, it's about companionship. Every bed you visit becomes a conversation not with the people who made them, but with the emotions they stored. The half-spoken things, the sighs pressed into pillows, the moments that couldn't be shouted so they were whispered into drawers. And as you travel, you start to carry your own echo. A locket tucked in your coat, a small velvet pouch of nothing at all, just weight, just space held open. A quiet symbol that you're not just visiting anymore. You're remembering, not just for yourself, for everyone who couldn't. And every night as you lie down in another new room, another unfamiliar creaking space, you whisper your simple ritual. If you've saved something, I'll keep it safe. And sometimes the bed creaks back. Somewhere between the Yorkshire Dales and a fishing village with too many staircases, you find it. Not another bed, the bed. You weren't looking for it, not really. You had no plan, no address, just a vague invitation from a woman you met at a bookstall in Whitby. She'd overheard you asking about old carpentry manuals and tapped your shoulder with a crooked finger. If you want a real story, she said, go to the Hollow House. Ask for the third room on the second floor, the one with the crooked mirror. Don't ask for a key. She doesn't need one. It sounded like nonsense. But here you are. And the moment you enter the room, third door on the left frame, slightly bowed with age, you feel it. Not a chill, not a presence, just attention. as if something in the air shifts to acknowledge you. And there against the far wall, bathed in angled light from a round window that is older than your country, stands the bed. It's simple. No gilding, no lion's paws, no velvet curtains or fussy trim. But the grain in the wood seems to move as you approach. It smells like beeswax and pine and something else. Clove old wool memory. You sit on the edge. The frame does not creak. And for the first time in months, you don't reach for a drawer or a hinge or a hidden panel. You just breathe because you can feel it. This bed knows all of them. It's the kind of bed that other beds remember. A prototype, a root system, a secret original. You close your eyes and place your palm on the center of the headboard. Nothing moves, but in your mind, something unfolds. Not a memory, a network. You see a tapestry of other rooms, the locket bed, the escape bed, the child's whistle, the priest's hole, the velvet box, the note that said wait, the instruction manual that stopped after 6 compartments. You see them all, and they're all connected. Not by the same maker, not by wood, not even by purpose. They're connected by intention. Because every person who hid something in a bed, whether to preserve, escape, mourn, dream, or remember, was participating in something larger than themselves. A quiet, sleeping legacy. Historians still argue whether such a network ever truly existed. Whether there were rules, a guild, a secret society of artisans building emotional architecture. But in that moment, you feel the certainty of it in your bones. There was no formal structure, just people who understood. People who felt that sometimes the most sacred part of life isn't what you say, but what you store. And where you store it. You press your forehead gently against the wood, not expecting anything, just gratitude. And in that silence, you feel the bed respond, not with sound, but with recognition. It accepts you, not as an explorer, not as a trespasser, but as someone who knows how to leave something behind. So you do. You pull out your notebook, the black one you've been filling since the first locket. You tear out one page, not the first, not the last, just one in the middle. It says, sometimes the container is the message. You fold it carefully, wrap it in the linen scrap you've carried with you since the beginning. You don't sign it, don't date it. You just slide it beneath the mattress between the slats. The bed does not stir, but you know it keeps it. You lie down, fully clothed, arms folded, and let your breath fall into the same rhythm as the light shifting on the ceiling. And in that perfect, reverent quiet, you understand something final. You are no longer the one receiving the story. You are now part of it. And one day someone else will sit on this bed. They'll press the wood. They'll listen. And they might find your folded page, or they might not. But either way, they'll know they're not alone. You leave the hollow house at dawn. No one sees you off. The front door creaks open on its own as if the house itself understands departure. You walk down the narrow stone path, cool mist clinging to your sleeves, and you don't look back. You don't need to. The bed remembers. And that's enough. In the weeks that follow, you stop seeking the beds. You don't ask innkeepers if their rooms are old or if their headboards seem thicker than they should be. You don't run your hands along carved roses or knock on hollow posts. You just live, travel, listen. And yet, they still find you. In a quiet cottage on the Isle of Skye, your host apologizes that the mattress is a bit too firm. You nod politely, lie down that night, and immediately feel the unmistakable press of hollow space beneath your spine. You don't open it. You just smile. Later, in a converted mill outside Oxford, a bed frame groans every time you roll over, but not from age. From design, a whisper in wood, a weight shifting in a cavity that's just large enough to hold a secret or two. Again, you leave it untouched. You're not the one who needs to see anymore. You're the one who knows it's there. The longer you carry these understandings, the more you begin to see the world differently. Every room holds potential. Every drawer might not be a drawer. Every silence hums with the possibility of a compartment waiting not to be opened, but to be believed in. And belief, that's what all of this has been about. The Victorians, for all their repression and rigidity, were remarkable believers. They believed in spirits, in messages, in architecture as emotion, in furniture as family. They believed in hiding things so well that even memory itself had to earn its way back. Historians still try to quantify their obsession with secrecy. But what if it wasn't about secrecy at all? What if it was about continuity? A way to hold on to the parts of life that didn't fit on a mantle or in a ledger. The glances, the promises, the almosts, the never-tolds. What if these compartments weren't meant to keep people out, but to invite the right ones in, You begin writing again, not just in your notebook, but long letters to people who may never read them. Some you tuck into hollowed books and return to secondhand shops. Others you bury inside pillowcases inside the corners of inn mattresses, where no one will find them until the fabric gives way and someone curious pulls a thread. You start thinking of yourself not as a collector, but as a gardener of echoes. You don't need to know who will come next. You just have to leave the trail. One night in a rented flat in London, you sleep in a bed that's far too modern. Stainless steel, plastic wheels, no secrets in sight. You lie awake longer than usual, missing the hum of old wood, the soft flecks of grain shifting under pressure. And then, just as your eyes begin to drift shut, the drawer beside you pops open slowly, carefully. Inside, beneath a stack of hotel brochures, you find a button. Simple, brass, shaped like a dove. You don't laugh, you don't cry. You just press it gently into your palm and whisper, "Hello again." Because this isn't about the bed anymore. It never was. It's about the people who needed them, and the ones like you who've learned how to listen. By now, your suitcase carries little more than essentials and echoes. Your journal, now thick and worn at the edges, is a map of a world few others realize exists. A world of careful architecture, soft rebellion, and secrets stored not to be forgotten, but to be preserved until someone earned them. You find yourself in a seaside town with no name worth remembering. You don't know how you ended up here, only that your feet kept moving until the land ran out. The sky is low, pressed tight to the sea like a blanket held against the chest. The inn is plain, 1 floor, 4 rooms. You're handed a key without asking. Room 4, the innkeeper says, distracted tapping ash into a cracked mug. It's got the old furniture. Locals say it creaks when it's got a something to say. He smirks, half mocking. You don't return the smile, not out of rudeness, but reverence, because of course it creaks. The room is small and square, no frills, but the bed. The bed is different. It's lower to the ground, almost humble. No post, no canopy, but the wood is old. Older than the building itself, maybe. The frame is dark and smooth, the kind that's been polished, more by hands and time than oil. You sit down, it creaks. You close your eyes and wait. Nothing moves. No drawers spring open. No trapdoors yawn beneath your heels. But something settles. The air thickens like a cup of tea steeped too long. And then you notice, one corner of the footboard is lighter than the rest. You press it. Nothing. But when you press it again slowly with a fingertip instead of force, a panel opens. And inside is a folded letter. No envelope. The paper is soft with age, the ink faded but legible. If you're reading this, I want you to know I never intended to hide forever. I just needed the space to be mine for a little while. If you find what I left, don't judge me. Just understand. We were all doing the best we could. It's signed only C. You sit for a long time, the letter warm in your hands. You don't feel like a voyeur. You feel like a link, another name in a long chain of people who've stumbled across compartments not by chance, but by readiness. C didn't write this to confess. C wrote this to connect. You fold the letter again, tuck it back, and leave your own behind. Not in the same compartment, that would be too easy. You pull back the edge of the mattress, slit a seam in the lining, and slip in a page from your journal. I hear you. I keep nothing. I carry everything. This room is still listening. Then you sew it closed with a single black thread. Because this isn't about being found. It's about making it possible. Historians still argue whether we over-romanticize the past, whether we assign too much meaning to what might have been coincidence, forgetfulness, decay. But they miss the point. Meaning is not inherent. It's assigned. And the people who built these beds, who tucked away rings and buttons and names and breath, chose to make those spaces sacred. They didn't wait for permission. They built meaning into the margins. You stand now brushing dust from your knees and face the bed one last time. Not with questions, but with thanks. And just before you leave the room, you turn off the light. Listen to the frame settle and whisper, "I'll leave the door unlocked in case someone else needs you." And the bed, as if satisfied, creaks once. Soft, final, whole. You return home. Not because the journey is over, but because something inside you says it's time to gather to let the threads of everything you've seen begin to braid themselves into something steady. Something you can carry forward without constantly chasing the next slat, the next hinge, the next whisper of beeswax and ghosted breath. Your own bed feels strange at first. Too light, too new, too honest. No secrets tucked into the frame, no hidden compartments, no cryptic initials carved beneath the headboard. Just a mattress. Just sheets, Just you. And yet, you find your fingers tracing the seams. Your palm presses into the grain of the frame just to see. Nothing moves. Not yet. But part of you wonders, could it? What if the point was never the antique craftsmanship, or the hidden drawer, or the escape route through a trapdoor? What if it was the intention? So one evening after dinner, in a long stretch of silence, you decide to build your own. Not a bed, not entirely, but a compartment, a secret, a space. You gather wood, sandpaper, a quiet playlist, no nails, just dowels and glue like the Victorians would have done. You don't try to be clever, just careful. You measure twice, cut once, and over a weekend of tea and quiet determination, you install it into the underside of your bed frame. Small, invisible to anyone not looking for it. And then you write a letter, not to anyone in particular, just to whoever might one day lie here and wonder. You are not the first to feel the quiet press of memory. I hope this space brings you calm, not curiosity. There is nothing inside but intention, and that I've learned is everything. You fold it, wrap it in linen, tie it with a black thread, and you place it in the compartment. Close the lid, seal it gently. Your bed creaks as you sit down, not from age, but from acknowledgement, because now it knows. It has been invited to join the legacy. You sleep better that night than you have in months. No locket under your pillow, no whistle in your coat, just breath, even and steady. You wake to sun filtering through blinds and realize maybe it was never about finding the old beds at all. Maybe the truest version of this legacy is what comes next. The movement wasn't just backward looking. It was forward, quiet rebellion in wood and linen. You begin to dream of others doing the same. A teacher in Nebraska sliding a note into a bedpost after a hard year. A grandmother in Kyoto folding an origami crane into a drawer lined with cherry bark. A child in Cairo hiding a seashell under their pillow believing someone someday will feel it. It spreads, not as a trend, but as a tenderness. You notice something else as the months pass. Catalogs, furniture ads. A line in a Scandinavian company's write-up features a soft, close drawer tucked into the footboard, perfect for keepsakes or secrets. They don't explain it. They don't need to. It's already begun. The return. Modern beds aren't entirely hollow anymore. They're beginning to remember. Historians will eventually write about it, call it the memory furniture revival, maybe. They'll cite influences, trace trends, interview designers who'll wax poetic about emotional utility. But you'll know the truth. It didn't start with factories or artisans or money. It started with you, and the locket, and the latches, and the letters you never kept, but never forgot. Now, when you travel, you still sleep in old inns. Still knock on headboards just once for luck. Still listen. But more often now, people whisper to you. My bed creaked in the night, but only once, and only after I told it something I never told anyone else. I found a scrap of ribbon in the slat. It smelled like cardamom. I kept it, but then I gave it back. You smile. You nod. And sometimes quietly you hand them a page from your notebook, because you're not the only gardener anymore. The whole world is beginning to grow again. You start receiving mail you didn't ask for. Small envelopes with no return address, packages wrapped in brown paper tied with hemp string, inside photographs of beds, sketches, tracings of drawer handles, notes written in tiny script, found in Wales, drawer behind the middle slat, 2 buttons, a child's tooth, Vienna apartment, headboard panel swung open after thunder, inside 3 pressed violets and a ribbon that whispered, no compartment, just a seam that wouldn't close until I left a poem inside. You don't ask how they got your address. It's not the kind of thing that matters now. You're part of something vast and warm and hidden, a whisper network of caretakers. And with every envelope, your map grows no longer geographical, but emotional. Because this is no longer about where the beds are. It's about what they're carrying and who they're carrying it for. Some letters come with questions. Is it okay if I put something in that's not mine? What if the bed is new, but it feels old? How do I know the compartment wants me? You always write back with the same phrase. If you feel the need to ask, you already belong. The beds, it seems, have become mirrors. Not for faces, but for feelings that don't fit in journals or voice memos or Instagram captions. They reflect the ache to be heard in silence, to be witnessed without audience. You begin collecting these reflections into a book, not to publish, not for profit, just a simple bound volume of echoes. You call it The Things We Tucked Away. Inside, you transcribe the findings. A cork from a wedding champagne bottle found in a twin bed in Sicily. A photo of a dog with the name Truman scrawled on the back tucked into a motel bed in Ohio. A note in Hindi that simply read, "I miss your laugh." Each entry holds weight far beyond its size. Historians still debate whether these beds function as deliberate time capsules or spontaneous shrines. Some believe they were tools of control spaces for hiding wealth, weapons, or evidence. Others insist they were purely sentimental. You now believe both are true because beds aren't static. They absorb what people need to release: fear, grief, romance, regret, hope. They take it in, tuck it deep, and hum softly until someone is ready to hear it again. And lately, more people seem ready. You receive a message from a woman in Seoul who found a tiny drawer lined with gold thread and filled it with sunflower seeds. From a man in Cairo who crafted a panel in his daughter's bed where she now hides poems she writes and cannot say aloud. The world is waking into quiet. Or perhaps sleeping more intentionally. And you keep listening. Your own bed is no longer empty. The compartment you built has grown not larger in size, but in presence. Sometimes when you can't sleep, you slide it open just to feel the air shift. You never look inside. That's not what it's for. It's a heartbeat, a pause, a promise that some part of you is always held. You start teaching others, not in classrooms, but in casual conversations at parks and cafes. You talk about compartments and their metaphorical cousins, journals, secret playlists, the act of whispering to someone asleep. You watch as people nod slowly, eyes lighting with recognition. They've had compartments all along. They just didn't have a word for them. Until now. The word spreads, and with it, the beds remember. You're invited to a wedding. Not unusual in itself, except the invitation is handwritten on parchment, sealed with wax. Inside a single sentence, "We're getting married in the house with the bed." You recognize the address instantly. It's the Hollow House. The couple is young, gentle, strange in the best way. They found the bed on a whim, booked the room for a weekend retreat, and left with a feeling they couldn't shake, that the bed wasn't just furniture, it was an invitation. So they returned, again and again, until one night beneath that rounded window and in the stillness of that sacred frame, they promised one another the kind of love that listens, that keeps compartments open even when they're empty, that believes in holding without owning. The ceremony is small, just 10 people. You're one of them. They marry barefoot beside the bed, sunlight pooling on the floor like a shared breath. No photographer, no playlist, just silence and wood and the knowledge that something understood is bearing witness. Later you find yourself alone in the room again, just you and the bed. You sit. It creaks softly, the familiar greeting. You don't open anything, don't reach for latches or lift panels. Instead you simply say aloud, "She found someone who understands. Thank you for helping her wait." It feels absurd and sacred at the same time, and it feels heard. Because in a world that rarely pauses, this bed has taught you the value of intimacy that doesn't need explanation. A kind of love that exists in objects, gestures, and the spaces between drawers. When you leave the room, there's a new page in the guest book. The bed gave us its blessing. Back home, you sit on your own bed, the one with the tiny hidden space beneath, and wonder how many other milestones are marked by things we don't say, but store. A child born, a friend lost, a departure not mourned because we never allowed ourselves the time. You remember a drawer in Wales where someone hid a baby shoe and nothing else. A pillow that held the scent of cinnamon and thyme. A compartment beneath a bed in New York that held 7 tiny paper stars and a note that read, "This is all I could carry." You write those stories down now. All of them. Not for an audience, but for continuity. You understand now your role has shifted once more. You are no longer a listener. You are a librarian. You're curating a catalog of secret spaces. Not for public display, not even for sharing unless someone truly needs to see it. Each story you record is like a pressed flower flattened by time, still fragrant. And just like that, the beds begin to bloom. You hear from a woman who's teaching her son to carve a compartment into his own bed. From a retiree in Finland who keeps a ledger of dreams tucked beneath a mattress, annotated with weather notes and moon phases. From a hospice nurse who began placing letters in patients' beds, notes of comfort written anonymously left for families to find. And one day a letter arrives from a man in his 90s. A letter with trembling handwriting and just 3 sentences. "I made a bed in 1951. I put my mother's locket in the post. I never told anyone, until now." You cry when you read it, not for sorrow, but for scale. Because this is so much bigger than beds. It's about the spaces we create to hold the unspoken, and the people we become when we learn to honor them. There comes a moment when you realize this will never end, not in the way stories usually do, with a tidy bow or a final reveal. The world of secret compartments is not a puzzle to be solved, but a conversation to be continued. And you are simply one of many voices in that quiet chorus. You sit in your room one evening, lamp-low tea cooling by your side, surrounded by stacks of letters and sketches and faded photographs. Each one represents a moment when someone chose not to forget, or perhaps chose to be remembered. You flip through your journal, the one nearly full now. The pages hum beneath your fingertips, not with the weight of secrets, but with the humility of trust. Because that's what these beds offer. Not just storage, not just clever carpentry. Trust. The trust that someone will come along not to exploit what's hidden, but to understand it. You pause on an entry from weeks ago. Under third slat child's marble, worn smooth, wrapped in gingham, no note, no explanation. You smile. Because not every secret needs an origin story. Some are simply left to be witnessed. And suddenly you wonder what will happen when you're gone, when your own compartment so carefully crafted beneath your bed is discovered by someone else. You picture it, a young woman, a tired traveler, an insomniac with curious fingers. They'll press where you pressed, feel the panels shift, find your folded linen and your simple message. Sometimes the container is the message. And in that moment, they'll become a librarian too. You close your journal and look around your room. It's quieter now, deeper somehow, as if the very air has been lined with soft velvet. You realize something profound. Beds are not about endings. They are about continuity. The Victorians may not have planned for this movement, but in honoring their impulse to carve space for grief, joy, rebellion, hope you are keeping the tradition alive. And so one day when you move house, you'll leave the compartment. You won't tell the new owner. You'll trust the bed to decide. And perhaps they'll never find it. Or perhaps one restless night, with the rain tapping at the window and a thought they can't shake pressing against their ribs, they'll run their fingers along the frame. Press. Hear a click. And join the story. Meanwhile, the letters keep arriving. A child in Portugal who drew a map of her imaginary kingdom and hid it in a bedpost for her future self. An elderly man in Japan who built a compartment in his wife's hospice bed where he placed a single origami crane each night until her last breath. A carpenter in Argentina crafting beds, now not for clients who ask, but for clients who don't, tucking one empty compartment into every frame he makes. You catalog them all. You're not a historian. You're not a scholar. You're a witness. And you finally understand legacy is not what we build. It's what we choose to leave unfinished, so others may continue. You lie down that night and whisper your ritual again. If you've saved something, I'll keep it safe. But this time you add, and if you haven't, maybe you will. Because even the emptiest compartment holds space for hope. And sometimes that is the greatest secret of all. You sleep more easily now. Not because the world has become less complex, but because you've accepted that complexity needs a place to rest too. And beds, especially the ones with stories folded into their frames, offer that place better than anything else ever could. You continue to travel, though not as urgently. Each new city, each old inn is approached with curiosity, not hunger. You no longer feel the need to find a compartment in every bed you sleep in. Sometimes the knowledge that one might be there is enough. That's the beauty of this legacy. It asks nothing, demands nothing. It simply waits. And the act of waiting becomes part of its magic. One winter night in a cabin surrounded by frost-laden pines, you find yourself speaking aloud, not to anyone in particular, just to the old bed that groans beneath you with each shift of your weight. I don't need to open you tonight, you say softly. I just need to know you're listening. And you swear the creak that follows sounds like the gentlest yes. Because after all this time, you've learned that these beds are not just passive objects. They are companions in the truest sense, keepers of the unsayable sentinels of the small moments that build a life. Historians will likely never categorize this phenomenon. There will be no grand theory of secret compartments, no chapter in the history books devoted to the whispering beds of the 19th century. But the stories will remain, because you and those like you will continue to tell them. One letter at a time, one pressed flower, one folded page slipped into a hollow space. You begin mentoring others now, not formally, not in classrooms, but through the simplest of acts, listening. When someone confides that they found a compartment, you don't ask what was inside. You ask, how did it make you feel? And that more than any object or artifact is the heart of the matter. The feeling. the quiet knowing, the sense of being part of something older, wider, softer than history. One spring evening, back in your own home, you decide to add something new to your compartment. Not a letter this time, a single white pebble, smooth as silk. No words, no message, just presence. You place it inside, close the panel, and smile. Because you've realized the point was never the finding, it was the leaving. The choice to trust that someday someone else will feel that small weight, turn it in their palm, and understand without ever needing an explanation. And as you lie back, the room cool and familiar around you, you feel the bed settle beneath you. Not as furniture, not as artifact, but as friend. A friend who remembers, a friend who waits, a friend who will carry your quiet story forward one sleeper at a time. You close your eyes, and this time as sleep claims you, it feels less like a descent and more like a joining. An endless lineage of whispered truths tucked beneath the linen folds of time. Wind down 300 words. So now, dear listener, as you rest beneath your own blankets, old or new, simple or carved, remember this. You are part of this story too. Your bed may not creak with the weight of secret compartments. Its posts may be plain, its frame unadorned. But even the simplest spaces hold the potential for meaning. Perhaps one day you'll press your palm against the grain and feel a shift. Or perhaps you'll be the one to leave something behind, a note, a ribbon, a thought no one else can hold. And that truly is enough. Because the act of choosing to create space for the unseen is a quiet kind of courage, a tenderness that echoes beyond words. So tonight, as you drift into dreams, let yourself imagine who lay here before you, what was whispered into the dark, what might still be waiting beneath wood and linen for gentle hands and an open heart. You are not alone. You never were. The beds remember, and now, so do you. Sleep well, dear traveler. The story continues.